Welcome to the Wizard of Radical Self-Respect. My name's Jared Mello, and I'm the Shepherd of Black Sheep. Today, we're getting back to our regularly scheduled programming here because we have another video to do about Nick Reiner, because one of his ex-roommates at one of the luxury rehabs he went to back in 2009 has spoken out and gave us some juicy details and some inside looks into Nick Reiner's character. How you doing, B? And before I get into this, though, today, make sure you're subscribed to the channel if you're not already. Remember to like the video and if you like it. But this is pretty interesting here. And to me, it points to more clues that there could be some cluster B stuff going on here with Nick Reiner, some character disordered stuff. And that doesn't mean he can't also be comorbid with schizoaffective disorder. It doesn't have to be one or the other. It can definitely be both. But to me, what we're going to hear here is simply more evidence that this NGI case is not going to work for him. Although the person we're going to listen to, he doesn't agree with me on that, but we'll see how that goes. And I apologize for being a little bit late here. We got about 18 inches of snow. Hello, tennis. Ellie, how much snow did you get where you are, Ellie? We got a boatload. And I shoveled once yesterday. It was 8 to 10 inches of powder. That was fine. But then afterwards, what happened was freezing rain came down, and then it's made it all solid ice on top, which made it 1,000 times harder to shovel today. You almost had to go out there with a pickaxe to break it apart. And even though it was only a few more inches, it was really hard. And I'm in good shape, but holy mackerel. When you're not used to working certain muscles, it's tough. It's exhausting. Over a foot, that makes sense. George, what's shaking? Let's see what this guy's name is. Joe, the lawyer. It's the first I'm seeing of this, but let's see how it goes. At the first I'm seeing of his channel, I should say. Then we got a Brian Etten video next, and then we got 2 Hidden Killers videos after that.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Joe the Lawyer. I'm your host, Joe Palmetto, a practicing criminal defense attorney in Pittsburgh, PA. Today, we're going to take a look at this article. Ex-roommate of entitled monster Nick Reiner details chilling experience at luxury rehab center. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. If you like my channel, please like, subscribe, comment, and share. I'm really looking to grow this channel. My last video, I got a lot of comments, so I truly appreciate that. A lot of the comments were about how Nick Reiner should not win on the basis of insanity. Whole bunch of those comments. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. I've also got an update on the Luigi Mangione case. And I want all my viewers to know I am a practicing criminal defense attorney. I represent people on everything from murder to assault to illegal firearm possession to drug trafficking to DUIs. So there's a lot of other good law YouTubers, right? On LawTube. There's a lot of other good ones. I have nothing against them. But many of them don't practice, and many of them don't have nearly the experience that I have in criminal defense. So I'm asking you to come to me to learn. That's one of the most important parts about this channel is we're going to use these cases to teach people about the criminal justice system, the court system.
And this guy is a good balancing act from Tony Bruschi. Tony Bruschi definitely airs more towards the prosecution side. Ashley Banfield, she probably does as well. But this guy's a defense lawyer, so it's going to be a little bit of a different perspective.
Overall. But also just if you want to get an opinion from somebody who's been in the trenches on these types of cases, you're looking at them right now. I actually just recently did a case where I didn't use an insanity defense, but I used something called diminished capacity. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Please like, subscribe, comment, and share. Before we dive into this article, raise your cup, your glass in the air. Today, I'm drinking the elixir of the gods for our same time sip. Outside of Diet Coke, I like coffee. I do drink water. Water, coffee, and Diet Coke are Joe's fuel for survival. So everybody cheers with me. It tastes better when we sit together. Cheers. Okay, let's jump into.
So Diet Coke, for those who don't know, has something called DL-phenylalanine in it. That's one of the reasons it has a mood boosting effect. DL-phenylalanine, it improves norepinephrine, maybe even dopamine a little bit too, I think. But it's one of the supplements that I take every day because I noticed it back in the day before I took any supplements. I was like, why is it that when I drink a diet soda, like I really feel better? One of the reasons is DL-phenylalanine.
This article, Nick Reiner's former roommate details his entitled behavior and violent outbursts at luxury rehab center before the alleged murders. And maybe somebody can tell me in the comments that Nick.
And yes, I don't drink diet sodas anymore. If you're going to drink a soda, I think you're better off with the high fruct. Very occasionally, I'll have a diet ginger ale if I'm really feeling frisky, which is not very often. I usually prefer just regular sparkling water.
Nick's eyes, that these kind.
But the aspartame, that's the other problem with the diet sodas. Aspartame, not very good for you.
Kind of like the eyes kind of popping out, these bug eyes can mean something when it comes to psychological disorders, if you know what I'm talking about. I a video like that had popped up on my YouTube feed, and I didn't click on it, but now, or maybe I saw it on like Facebook or something, but I'm interested to hear what people say. In the summer of 2009, Danny Svilar, a troubled 15-year-old, arrived at a prestigious California rehabilitation facility after his mother staged an intervention following a devastating shopping addiction that had racked up 250,000. Is that pounds? Are we looking at British pounds?
That is indeed British pounds, I believe. Either that or euros. Either one, either way, that's a lot of money, though. 250 grand shopping addiction, that's similar to, I guess, a gambling addiction. The only benefit to a shopping addiction is you at least have something tangible. If it's gambling, you lose. That money's gone. Gone, baby, gone. But shopping, you at least have the products, I guess. But 250,000, that's a lot of money. Whether it's pounds or euros.
His father's credit card. I guess so. Is the International Business Times. I don't know. Is this a British or English website? What he encountered in that first rehab room, I didn't know people could go to rehab for shopping addiction, but I guess the children or relatives or people who are extremely rich, I can see this happening. What he encountered in that first rehab room would become an unsettling window into the mind of someone the world would later know as an accused killer. His ex-roommate was Nick Reiner, and from the beginning, something felt deeply wrong. I also want to say Washington Post did just published a deep article on Nick Reiner. Excuse me. It's behind a paywall, so I don't really have.
So again, from the beginning, something was very deeply wrong with Nick Reiner. And from everything we went over here, it sounds exactly right. It sounds like he's had issues for a long time, stemming back to childhood. And there's been entitlement, bratty behavior, violent outbursts, anger, aggression, not being able to not get his way, envy, bitterness, resentfulness, all sorts.
Any desire to.
And don't forget, lack of empathy too.
Subscribe to the Washington Post, so I'm not going to be able to read it. But if anybody read it, maybe you can let me know. He had no sense of gratitude whatsoever. Svilar, now 32 and recovered from his own addiction, has broken his silence about those harrowing weeks shared with the Hollywood director's son. And excuse me, this is some good coffee, so excuse me for a sip. The Wyoming restaurateur claims Nick was fundamentally unlike other privileged teenagers at the facility, not because he suffered more, but because he appreciated less.
That's a pretty damning line. Nick was fundamentally different, not because he suffered more, but because he appreciated less. That is something they say in Cluster B, folks, that they struggle to express gratitude in a genuine way. They might show gratitude as a way to perfect their image management or as a way to get supply from others or look good to other people, but genuine gratitude, they can often struggle with.
Whilst his parents, acclaimed director Rob Reiner and producer Michelle Stinger, what? Come on. International Business Times, what are you doing here? I lost the article. Okay. Very glitchy. Whilst his parents, acclaimed director Rob Reiner,
And this isn't me, his thing's just cut out.
attended every family group session without fail. His parents attended every family group session without fail, financing his treatment at a staggering $60,000 per month. Nick appeared consumed by a seething anger towards them. He just had really oppressed anger towards the fame. Svilar told the Daily Mail, I don't know how it is having a father with that level of fame, but regardless of that, Nick had no sense of gratitude, no sense of appreciation. He was just an effing pompous little punk. He just wanted to be out, smoking pot, doing pills, doing whatever.
An effing pompous little punk that had all sorts of seething anger towards his parents and resented the fame. I mean, is that just schizoaffective disorder? Or is that sound more like some character disorder issues and cluster B issues? I think that part sounds more cluster B to me. I mean, again, and as I've said before, any issue someone has, schizophrenia, ADHD, autism, narcissism, borderline, bipolar, anxiety, any one of those issues, you can also be an asshole at the same time. So any diagnosis you have doesn't explain every ounce of your behavior. It just doesn't. It can explain a lot of it. It can explain good chunks of it. But also, we all still have our own personalities too. Some people can still be an asshole. Just something to remember.
And his family just wanted him to get help. What struck Svilar most was the contradiction. The other teenagers in the facility, many from wealthy backgrounds, had absent parents who relied entirely on nannies and hired handlers. This is the world we live in today, and you know, even rich people are having, not people who aren't rich have to hire nannies and handlers. Okay, it's just this is the facts of the economy in 2025. Yet Rob and Michelle Reiner were present, engaged, and genuinely invested in their son's recovery. The parents of these children with money, they usually are not truly involved in wanting to help them. I believe that. Svilar explained, they have a hired hand, basically being their handler, if you will. But Rob and Michelle were there for every single family group. They were there for every therapy session. They didn't have to give me the time of day. I played Frisbee with Rob Reiner, for God's sake. They just wanted him to get well.
So what do you think about this? So here, Rob and Michelle Reiner, they're here at this facility, like showing up for their son. And I bet you there's a lot of other wealthy parents that just kind of throw them to the rehab and say, fix him. I don't want to be bothered with him. But to me, it seems like Rob and his wife, they were really trying. They were actively trying to help their son. I think that speaks to a character. It speaks to a good level of character to do that. They weren't just washing their hands of him. They were really trying to help him. That's just what it seems like to me.
Speaks very positively for his parents. I mean, did they create him? I don't know. My resistance to them creating him comes from the fact that their other children seem to be pretty well-adjusted individuals. But, you know, I don't know. Yet Nick regularly ranted about how much he hated his effing parents. This wasn't the grumbling of a typical teenager or something darker and more volatile. The rage that shocked a teenager. What began as a seemingly friendly dynamic between roommates transformed into something frightening. On one occasion, Svilar made an offhand comparison that would trigger a shocking display of aggression. I compared him to looking like John Travolta's son that died, and that set him off, referring to the late actor's son, Jet Travolta. Hold on a second. Before we go anywhere, let's see what this guy looked like. Jet Travolta. Tough to say. I mean, I don't know. Jet Travolta's son passed away. I don't really know this story. John Travolta took to Instagram to send his late son, Jet, who passed away, love on what would have been his 29th birthday. All right. Looks I can see a little bit. These like celebrity.
The connection he has is trash. This snack, crackle, and pop.
Channels are so glitchy. Pages. I can see a little bit of what they're talking about here. Sorry, I was just trying to get a bigger picture. I guess he looks a little bit like Nick, but I really wouldn't go too far with that. I don't know how old John Travolta's son was when he passed. Nick erupted. We had good rapport at first, but then I was like, oh my God, that's who you remind me of. And it kind of turned ugly after that. Svilar recounted. He definitely tried to get aggressive with me, tried to get physical, and then a tech had to step in. He was getting into my face and raising a fist. The incident was severe enough that the two were separated.
Sounds like a very aggressive personality just for saying he looked like someone. Out of hand, I would say.
During their final nights together, Svilar said the late night conversations between them felt deeply unsettling. We would talk at night after lights were out, and some of the things he said really threw me the wrong way because I'm a 15-year-old boy in the same room as somebody with a crazy addiction. It was very, very chilling, but also a crazy new experience for me. Well, I mean, these rehabs, like they put somebody with a shopping addiction in the same room as somebody with an actual like drug addiction. I guess, where do you put somebody with a shopping addiction? Because 95% of the people in there got to be in there for a drug addiction. Now, following the brutal deaths of Rob Reiner and Michelle Singer, found stabbed in their $13.5 million Brentwood mansion on 14 December, Svilar's fears have crystallized into something far more sinister. Nick is accused of their murders. When Svilar heard the news, he said he knew immediately who was responsible. Whether he relapsed or whether it was mental disorder, I knew exactly who it was. And he referred to him as an entitled monster, which, everybody in the comments.
I mean, hey, entitled monster, given everything we've know about him, how many hours have we gone over him on this channel? 20, 30, 40 hours? Got to be close to that. From everything we know, entitled monster sounds pretty accurate to me. But what do you think, chat?
Seems to agree with that analysis. Look, the prosecution in this case is going to look at Nick's history, right? And he's got a history of violence. I don't think he has a history of anything this violent and being erratic, et cetera, et cetera. And then they're going to argue that he wasn't insane. He's just evil. And I've literally had prosecutors, I've seen prosecutors in closings call defendants evil. That's what they're going to say here. He knew what was going on. He understood what was going on. He only had this like psychoaffective, schizophrenia.
I think he absolutely knew what was going on. It's not that he wasn't aware. He just didn't care. That's the famous Dr. George Simon line. To me, that sounds like him.
Schizoaffective disorder, which is not as severe. And they're going to say he planned it and that the nature of the killings themselves show that he planned it. I mean, he did it while they were in their bed. And from what I read, the stabbing and the cutting was very horrific in a way that really could maybe only be done. Like this wasn't like, you might like somebody with schizophrenia like might have an outburst during a struggle and like maybe stab somebody once, right? But to repeatedly stab someone is a bit of a different story, right? And to kind of do what Nick did here, cut the
Again, to be able to do that, a knife killing is extremely intimate. You have to be up close and personal. There is no detachment in that kind, especially a frontal knife killing, even a throat. No, there's just no detachment there. It's very intimate. It speaks to a very emotional crime, angry, just like complete bitterness, anger, rage. It's wild.
them so many different times and slit their throats. Um, Horrible, just horrible. So the prosecution's going to have a strong case to say he's not insane. But the more I read about him, the more it goes both ways, because it's like, yeah, he's always been a loose cannon, and, can't feel emotion, that can't show genuine gratitude for things. That those are also symptoms of serious mental illness. So I really don't know. I still think
This is where I don't agree with him. Again, this is him being a defense lawyer. All those other things, the personality disorder, character disorder, that's not enough to get an NGI. If it was, 90 something percent of the criminals would not be getting convicted. They'd be getting NGI. Because what do you think the population in a prison, what percentage of them have a personality disorder? 80 to 90%? It's got to be pretty high.
he may have a pretty good insanity case. I don't think, no matter what, he's ever going to walk around as a free man again. I mean, California, I guess, you never know. But I doubt it. No matter what, I don't think he's ever going to walk around as a free man. But if he gets, not guilty by reason of insanity, he'll just be in a mental hospital probably the rest of his life. And so, really all we're talking about here is the difference between a prison and a mental hospital as far as the result, right? I think everybody agrees he's going away no matter what. But very, very, just interesting article. I thought today on a Saturday, there wasn't be any news, but this came out a couple days ago. And so I wanted to hit on this article. Now let's jump over to our next case that is on the docket. Jury selection for Luigi Mangione's federal.
And we'll go over maybe that another time, but not today. In the book I'm reading for my preparation of my Mike King interview, he talks about the BTK killer. BTK stands for bind, torture, kill. Talks about the Green River killer, Ted Bundy. He even mentions Luigi. I was speaking to Mike Wednesday evening as of now, so I might not be going live Wednesday evening, by the way.
This episode, I'm going to focus on the latest developments with Nick Reiner. There's some big new scoops that have come out that I want to share with you all. And then I'm going to have retired FBI agent Maureen O'Connell on with me to discuss all of this and get her analysis. And she's always really, really great on this case because she's totally dialed in.
So all people, remember to like the video if you're here, subscribe to the channel, and super chats are the best way to have me answer questions. But I also want to go over this. This is a good thing to go over. But I have known a couple people with schizoaffective. One is horrible, entitled, and evil. One isn't and is worthy of compassion and love. But what does that tell you, Lisbeth? It tells you that it's not the schizoaffective. It tells you there can be other things going on. So it can be comorbid with narcissism, psychopathy, antisocial personality disorder, or just an asshole. That's what that tells me.
and she actually lives very, very close to where the Reiner murders happened. So I'm going to get the latest on Nick Reiner's condition in jail, and there's some new information coming out about that in a second. But first, I want to start with what we're learning about this conservatorship that Nick Reiner was reportedly.
Look at Brian Etten here telling stories like, "Are you afraid of the dark?" in a campfire in a tent. I love it.
Under back in 2020. New details about the conservatorship are now coming out. Reiner, of course, is accused of murdering his parents, Rob and Michelle Reiner. It was just a brutal, brutal murder in their home. He's accused of stabbing his parents to death. But back to this mental health conservatorship, it reportedly lasted a year. Again, started back in 2020. The New York Times reports it is what's known as an LPS conservatorship, which is based on a 1967 law, and it established a new process for involuntary psychiatric treatment in California. And it's somewhat different from, I've been doing some research today, it's somewhat different from other conservatorships that we've heard of, like the one that Britney Spears had, that was mainly just to control her finances for the most part. LPS conservatorships usually start with an involuntary psychiatric hospitalization, which seems to make sense when you look into Nick Reiner's past. It lets a professional conservator, someone close to the patient, like a family member or someone that the family appoints, make important decisions about medical treatment and also medications. And Reiner's conservatorship reportedly only lasted a year, which is something really interesting that I'm going to dive into later in the episode. It could have, it seems like, been extended longer, but it only lasted a year. And there's some information.
So YouTube blocked me from commenting this, Eva, but being comorbid means you have more than one mental illness or more than one disorder at the same time. That's what comorbid means.
Coming out about why, which I'll explain in a second. We know that Reiner has had a long history of mental illness. In terms of his situation right now in jail, where he, awaits trial, if he ends up going to trial, according to TMZ, Reiner is in what they're calling a, quote, delirious state since the murders. And they're saying that he's appearing almost childlike in jail. TMZ reports that Reiner can't process the consequences of what he has done, that he can't even understand where he is right now.
And some of that can also be a tactic to kind of avoid accountability a little bit, regression into a childlike state. I've seen that happen before. You see that happen sometimes with borderlines or narcissistic people. They'll try to regress and act like so childlike in order to kind of not get consequences. It's something that can happen. And especially for someone like Nick Reiner, who's lived, besides his addiction, like a fairly cozy life, besides the mental health and addiction stuff. So now here he is in this no more luxuries now. So he's probably feeling it.
And is basically out of his head right now. That's the way that they are describing it. And they're reporting it has all the markings of what they are calling a meth murder. And that Reiner was likely using meth at the time of the murders, which, if you've been listening to my show, it was last month that I first interviewed Dr. Drew, and that is literally exactly what he told me last month. Early on, he was already suspecting that meth was involved. I want to remind you again, listen to what Dr. Drew told me.
When I heard about it, I said, this has got to be methamphetamine, because methamphetamine causes people to be violent, causes them to pick up sharp objects. You see, are you in Los Angeles very often?
Sometimes, yeah. I live in Florida, but sometimes.
All right. Well, the guys running around our streets with machetes, that's methamphetamine. They all are meth. So it's not at all unusual for somebody on meth to become violent and to pick up a sharp object. Now, when somebody does it against a family member, they are typically in like a fugue state. My prediction will be he won't remember what happened, and he will not be lying. And whether that fugue was related to...
I remember we went over this a while ago, right? We went over Dr. Drew saying this. I agree with him about the methamphetamine thing. The part I didn't agree with, though, was him saying he won't remember. I can't say I agree with that completely. Now, is it possible to black out from meth? Yeah, especially if it's been more of a bender. Yeah. And if you add drinking or something else to the mix, sure. But we don't know the toxicology report yet. And I think it's a guess to say he wouldn't remember. I don't know about that.
Is psychotic illness or meth or both, it kind of doesn't matter.
So in terms of Reiner's legal case, his prominent attorney, Alan Jackson, is off the case now, and the reason is not known, though most of the speculation seems to point to the fact that Nick Reiner's siblings may not have wanted to pay Alan Jackson anymore. And I've got some new information about what they may have been paying him, which is coming up a little later in the episode in my interview with Maureen, which you'll hear in a second. But they apparently didn't want to pay for it. At least that's what it appears is happening, because he now has a public defender. It's not like they got him a different lawyer. He now has a public defender representing him. I'm joined now by Maureen O'Connell, a retired FBI agent and host
Danielle, where are you? It's your girl, Maureen.
Of the podcast Best Case, Worst Case. It's always nice to see you, Maureen. It's always nice to talk to you about these Nick Reiner updates, especially since you're LA and you're sort of in the know on this whole thing. First, I wanted to ask you, there's this new reporting that he is in a delirious state since the murders and appears almost childlike in jail right now and does not understand the consequences of what he's done and can't even really understand where he is right now. Do you buy that?
No, but I'm salty and I don't buy much. And he was probably told from his attorney before Alan Jackson had to pull out that, hey, this is your best defense and you're probably your only defense. I'm sure they discussed a whole bunch of strategies, and it wouldn't be the first time that a criminal has acted like he was, bananas for a long time too, because he knows he's being filmed, not all the time, but to a certain extent. And he knows people are watching him in this situation very carefully. He'd be smart, to pretend like he's completely diminished.
Well, and there's been reporting too that he was on meth, which you've been saying really since the beginning. And then I interviewed Dr. Drew, who said he thought he was in a meth psychosis. If that's the case, though, and then he was now obviously off the meth because he's in jail, wouldn't he? I would think he would come back to reality by this point.
I would too, but I'm not a medical professional. I would lean on what Dr. Drew said, obviously way more than what I'm saying in that regard. But it's, he's all by himself. He can be his regular self all night long and then sleep till 1 PM and then just act a fool for the rest of the day. Or he could have mental illness, or he could have a little bit of mental illness and is really playing it up because he's a drama queen. But, we don't know. I'm interested to see what the experts say when they weigh in, and they're going to weigh in on both sides. And we have to understand that, what's happening is probably closer to the middle.
Yes, folks, 483 people watching. We need some more likes out there, please.
Actually saw him, though, because you were in court. I mean,
yes.
I haven't actually been in the courtroom. You have. Hearing these reports now that he has no idea what's going on and is still totally out of it. I mean, how does that, equate with what you saw for yourself?
It doesn't square with what I saw, and I had a pretty clear view of him the entire time, which was strange because when I first sat down, I assumed he'd be closer to the middle of the box, and I couldn't see anything. And so I was like, this has been I hope this isn't a waste of my time coming down here and waiting all the time beforehand. But once they brought him in, he was just, right at the north end of that box, right near the exit door. And I had a clear view all the way to his face for the whole time.
And here's the thing about Maureen, too. She has a calm confidence to her. That's what you can sense. Like, I can see, like, I'm a professional face reader and I'm good at picking up on people's energies. She has a calm confidence where she's sharp, intelligent, and her calm confidence is contagious, meaning it puts other people at ease when they're talking to her as well, because she's not trying to boast or show off or be arrogant or cocky. Like, no, she's telling it as it is. Cool, calm, collect. That's what I like about her.
As a matter of fact, all the other reporters were asking me, what do you see? What do you see? Because I just had this kind of miraculous alley that was just a clear shot. The only thing I saw was when he, that was out of character, he seemed to be paying attention. He seemed to have his mouth a little bit agape, but in a lot of photographs that we've seen, he has his mouth open a lot like, and so there was a lot of that. And there was only that one time where he turned and looked maniacally at I think he was looking for someone in his family hoping that they would be in the audience, but in fact they weren't. So other than that, even every time the judge spoke to him or whatever, he was like, "Yes, Your Honor, I understand." I mean, he didn't seem heavily medicated, but I wasn't within 10 feet. So, I couldn't see his pupils or anything, but he seemed to be with it. He seemed to be coherent. He seemed to understand. I saw the Alan Jackson talk to him about something and he was nodding in agreement, like, okay, whatever you're saying, I understand. And then that's when his new attorney, the public defender, walked up and talked to him for a little bit and he nodded in agreement. So, he looked like a relatively normal, his responses appeared to be relatively normal considering the circumstances that we were in. So I don't know.
There are some new reports too that the staff at the medical examiner's office, who obviously see a lot, were even particularly disturbed by the condition of Rob and Michelle, which, I don't want to get too gruesome, and you and I have talked about it before, but it must have really been a bad scene.
It had to be a bad scene because since we last spoke, and I know I may have mentioned it before, but more and more, I really believe they were both wide awake when this thing happened. I think that when he came into the room, it was like a startling event. I don't know if he jumped on his dad over the covers to straddle him or what. Because if as a human, when we're going against two people, like if you're getting into a fight, you need to incapacitate at least one of them relatively quickly. And so my thought process is it's going to be the dad, because we have all these people saying that his dad would restrain him when he would lose his mind or act up or whatever he was doing, just try to restrain him. And so that would be the first person that I would try to, and I hate to use the word neutralize, but in his mind, that's what he's thinking. So if your parents are under the covers and you jump on one of them, if you've ever had an older sibling tickle you or anything and you're under the covers and they get on top, you're done. You just, you can't move. You can't move your arms. You can't move anything. But at that same point, you would then wake up your mom or whoever, if it happened in the reverse, which I wouldn't suspect. So my thought is more and more and more, they were both awake. They were both witnessing what was happening, not only at the hands of their son, but to the person they loved, because those two just loved each other. It was obvious that Rob Reiner and his wife, Michelle, loved each other. And I mean, when you just imagine that scene, it would make sense to me that it was a gnarly, gnarly crime scene.
And I've said this many times, but there's probably all sorts of video of the Reiner household. I mean, you're looking at a house that's over $1 million, most definitely. How many security cameras are there? Where are they pointed? But there might even be actual video evidence of this. Now, some people push back on me and said, "Oh, you think they're going to have a security camera on their bed?" It's like, hey, you never know. You never know. Could be some sort of motion detector thing going on. And unless he turned them off, Nick Reiner, which would also show premeditation, by the way, like there's probably something.
Started by attacking his dad and stabbing his dad. Why do you think Michelle couldn't get away or run down to the phone? Or do you think she was just trying to stop him? Or
yeah, it's instinctive for her to stop him. It's also instinctive for her to help her husband. I mean, you can't, in a situation like that, Brian, obviously time is of the essence, and you understand very clearly that it's not going to take too many strikes for him to end Rob's life.
Yeah, gosh, I hate where my mind goes. Even it's terrible to think about the two of them in bed and the way you described. It's really a good description though, being under the covers. I never thought about that. You really can't, if someone's on top of you, it is like a straitjacket almost.
Yeah. and the only times I've ever had that happen to me, I have a great big family, and your sister jumps on you to scare you and tickle you and everything, and you just can't move. And if you're ticklish, you just have to lay there and and laugh until it's over, because you cannot defend yourself, you cannot move. But first we talked about approaching, like, if you were going to do the sneak up version of it, then I felt at that point, if that's what the situation was, that one would have to pull the cover down or the sheets down a little bit. But I don't know. I'm telling you, the blood pattern analysis and the blood spatter, the wounding, the ME is going to be able to tell a very, very distinctive story about what happened to whom, when, which happened first.
Weren't you telling me, I think this was just when we were chatting on the phone, not on a podcast, about, because you used to do this, that you can get fingerprints off of skin? Is that true?
I was certified to lift fingerprints off human skin. It's very difficult. It's very tedious. I haven't really heard a lot about that at all I haven't heard about it at all. But we did study this, the FBI ERT team in Los Angeles. We studied it. To me, it was just fascinating. There are just a number of steps you have to take before you can even attempt to try to lift fingerprints off of the human body. But the interesting part is you have to have some sort of idea as to what happened, because you're not going to put fingerprint powder all over the entire body. That's ridiculous. You're going to do what the ME generally does in, let's say, a child who's suspected of being abused and is now deceased. The ME will, as a general practice, turn on a black light. And what the black light does to a human body is it'll show areas where where a black and blue mark would produce itself if the person still lived. So there's an old saying in forensics that dead bodies don't bleed. And part of what a black and blue mark is internal bleeding to a certain extent. So broken capillaries, stuff like that. So when you squeeze someone really hard enough to hold them down, you're going to be able to see what would have turned into a black and blue mark. You'll see it before it even emerges to the surface of the skin. So when you're trying to lift fingerprints off human skin, you're going to bring the body to room temperature. Then you're going to turn the black light on, or you can turn the black light on, I guess, while you're waiting. But turn the black light on to see if there's any areas where it appears there was a handprint, or if you know the scenario under which this person died, you may be able to try to figure out where this person may have touched the body. And then you use extensive oblique lighting. You can use the black light first, and then you use oblique lighting, which means like, here's a flashlight, which means like sideways.
This is kind of news to me. I didn't realize this was a thing. I can't say I'm surprised, but this is pretty interesting how they can pull fingerprints off of the human body, skin.
Ways, instead of looking at carpet like this, you're down on the ground on the carpet looking at the surface of the fibers to just see everything. And with fingerprints, you're going to be looking every which way you can with the flashlights. I just lifted some fingerprints the other day for a client, because I have a business where security consulting business, and we do all kinds of different things for clients, and she wanted this car fingerprinted. So I did, and it was the lighting that was able to, because the lighting will catch the side of the ridges, and then you have a better understanding as to how to approach it. The development of a fingerprint in any way, shape, or form is a very slow process. It's not where you're dipping your brush into dark black powder and twirling it around like you see on TV. That would fill in the ridges too much, and it could overfill, and then it's much harder to see the ridge detail. I always do it very slowly and very meticulously. And so as I said, I've been certified in lifting fingerprints off human skin, but it's a perishable skill. It's been a long time since I've done it, and it's interesting you say that, because
That's a great vocabulary word, a perishable skill. It's a fancy way to say if you don't use it, you lose it. A perishable skill. I like that. Sort of how I like doing a favor to the truth as well. As our buddy Alan Jackson said.
I haven't heard of any cases where they do that anymore. So it must not be, the juice may not be worth the squeeze. It's a lot of work.
Interesting. Yeah, I wonder if it would come into play with this case, or if they, if they can get the fingerprints off the knife and just other parts of the bedroom, if they would even need fingerprints off the skin.
Yeah. It's a roll of the dice. It's not always successful, so it may just not be worth it as a general practice anymore. So they may just do it only for other cases. I don't know.
Have you heard anything new about Alan Jackson? I mean, obviously, when you went to court, that was a big day because it came as a shock to everybody that he was, at least it came as a shock to me, that he was off the case. And you and I had talked about thinking that it was, maybe the siblings, we don't know why for sure, but that maybe the siblings didn't want to keep paying the bill. Has anything else bubbled up that you've heard of?
Yes. First of all, it had to be the money, because if it wasn't the money, they would have hired another attorney. And
that's something we've said on the channel too, right? You have to be indigent and it has to be proven in order to get a public defender. The fact that they didn't get another high-powered lawyer means to me, like she said, definitely because of money.
I heard that the family actually paid $4 million to Alan Jackson. And I think I know I said it to you. I don't know if it was on air or off air, but when the first part of his statement was, I just want you to know that from December 14th on, my team and I, and he motioned to his team, have spent every waking hours, sometimes, I don't know if it was 18 to 20 hours a day, trying to create the best defense possible for Nick. And I just said right there, that's an explanation for why so much money is gone. And whatever, is he a determined person? Yes, he is. Alan Jackson. Is he a good attorney? Yes. Do you get those results without working long hours? No. But $4 million is a lot of money. I don't know if that's, I heard that from someone who I think is reliable, but I don't know that to be 100% true. It's, undetermined at this point.
It's a good point you make, though, that, they didn't bring in another lawyer. It's now the public defender's office, right, which would indicate that they, for whatever reason, maybe turned on their brother. I mean, maybe they saw the pictures. Who knows?
Right. They have to. Well, I talk a lot about time and the in any situation, any significant situation in your life, you look at it one way right when it happens. And as time progresses, you see it entirely differently. I mean, even look at divorce cases. You see women who were cheated on and they're done and they're getting a divorce and it's over and blah, blah, blah. And then, 4 months later, you run into them and she decided to forgive them and they're back together. And you're just like, wow, how does that happen? It happens. People have a change of heart and it's based on a lot of different things. But and
again, the kids, the siblings, they might have found some of the crime scene photos. Maybe you just had more time to marinate in the system and process it. And they were like, you know what? Fuck this. Like, he's on his own. That might have been what they said.
This one, I really think, I know after my mom passed and it was of natural causes, but very suddenly, just going back to her house, it was just crazy. She died in her bed and I went back in her room, and I mean, you want to spend time there, you just ruminate about things, and there's just no way that they're not ruminating about this stuff. I'm sure Romy's having the most difficult time because she actually saw, what her dad looked like. God love her. So I'm just praying for those other those two surviving children.
Yeah. I mean, in particular, Romy, I'm kind of worried about her. She's already had issues with substances in the past, smoking those, 25 joints a day or something like that. That's impressive. I don't even know how you do that. Usually weed has this self-limiting plateau where you can only get so high. Unlike with booze, where you can get more drunk, not really the same with weed. But I mean, she might be seeing that stuff in her nightmares. I mean, she can get PTSD from the event. I mean, how many people see their murdered parents? Very few people. So I feel really bad for her.
Nick's brother and sister.
Mm. Yeah, and I've seen, I mean, there's some like paparazzi, it's terrible, that have followed them around, and there's been some pictures. I don't know if you've seen them of them like out walking on the beach, and it's just like so low to try to get photos of them right now. I mean, I know that's kind of how it works in LA, but just I
No,
don't
I
know.
haven't seen those.
Bothered me
photos.
when I saw those. I wanted to ask you also about the conservatorship. There's the reporting out now that Nick was in a conservatorship in 2020, a mental health conservatorship, but then that it only lasted a year and it wasn't extended. What does that mean to you? What do you think?
They didn't want him to get his hands on any money, because every time he got his hands on money or a good credit card, because even if you don't give an addict actual cash, if you give them a credit card, they'll be at gas pumps saying, "Hey, I'll fill your tank if you give me $50. Hey, I'll pay for a hotel room if it's a $400 a night hotel room. I'll pay for your hotel room if you give me $200." I mean, this is how they just, it's workaround city, man. They find ways to blow cash because they have to, they're always chasing that high. And so I think that's probably what happened. He just demonstrated yet again that he can't be responsible, and they didn't want him. I don't know what they thought was happening or how much money he was wasting or spending, but
Are you surprised it didn't last longer than a year?
Yes and no. Yes, because I think that the evidence will show that he was terrible with money his entire life and has blown a ton of money. And if you have a forensic accountant go over it, it's going to blow everybody's ever-loving mind when they see the amounts. But no, because they believe not only in second chances, but in thousands of chances. They wanted their kids all to be successful. They really did everything in their power, everything they thought was in Nick's best interest. And so, yes, I could easily see them giving him every chance on earth, which it sounds like they did.
I wonder if this will help if he ends up, which it appears he will be, going after the insanity defense, because they can go back and say he even had this conservatorship.
It's definitely going to help.
Yeah.
Because with that conservatorship, they can put him into rehab. They can make all kinds of decisions for him that he traditionally was always making for himself. And it sounds to me like this was after the making of that movie, Becoming Charlie, because as we all recall, the footage of Rob Reiner talking about his son was, "I shouldn't have listened to the experts. I know my son better. I should have just listened to my son." It sounded like he had a reversal on that position when we get up to the point of conservatorship.
A friend was reported saying about the conservatorship, Nick hated being under someone's thumb. He considered it beneath him. It was a huge blow to his ego and embarrassing. And even discussions about renewed conservatorship were reportedly explosive. Any mention or talks about being placed under another conservatorship would have set Nick off. All hell would have broken loose.
So I guess they're going to say maybe this is something that prompted it. Another conservatorship. Maybe. Would it add up? Sure. I mean, but what does that also say about Nick Reiner? A narcissistic injury? Not wanting to be feeling less than? Which is understandable, but at the same time, you only have really your actions to blame if you're not improving, if you're not doing what you need to do for your own recovery.
So apparently
That's not someone that's suffering from mental health. That's a petulant man-child throwing a tantrum, which is what we've seen over and over with this guy. He's a
Amen, Maureen, a petulant man-child that got a narcissistic injury. That's what I think it is too.
above it. It's embarrassing to him. his own behavior doesn't embarrass him, but this does. This is people that are trying to look out for your best interest and always have looked out for your best interest. And this is how you treat them. You explode at home. You make everyone walk on eggshells. That makes them feel fine. But when someone holds him accountable, even for something as basic as this, he loses his mind and lets everybody else suffer. Why? Because it's all about him.
Yeah, he considered it beneath him. It was a huge blow to his ego. It's interesting thinking about him having an ego, because they've tried to paint him as just like.
And again, that's the narcissism. That's that hierarchical thinking of like being hypersensitive to criticism and perceived criticism, losing control of his image and his conservatorship. All of that tracks with cluster B, baby. It just does.
Like this week, he doesn't remember anything that happened.
No, he remembers. He may be in the state that he's in right now because he is remembering what he's doing, and he realizes nobody else is giving a shit about him. Before, you have these two powerful parents who can really wield a lot of weight whichever way they turn. Without those two massive pillars in his life, and now his brother and sister pulling out a little bit, he's found himself for the first time ever truly on an island by himself, and he doesn't like what he sees. And who would?
Boom! Mic drop by Maureen. He doesn't like what he sees, and who would? And honestly, that's the kind of anger someone like Nick probably needs or needed more so, because that petulant man-child thing, if you try to coddle them, they're just going to exploit the fuck out of that. But what they need is someone like Maureen to say, like, nah, we're not handling it. We're not putting that with that shit here. Certainly not. You got to do what you got to do, or tough luck. And in some cases, I know tough love's out of fashion now, but for someone like Nick Reiner, that's probably what he needed. That's what I'll say to that. So apparently Jumpsuit Pablo, he's got another one out here too.
Nick Reiner is now fooling everyone so hard that the public is calling for him not to be forced to go to trial and to simply be set free. And let me tell you, he is playing a role.
Caroline, thank you for becoming a member. I appreciate that. Anyone else who wants to become a member, I'm going to try to do some like maybe weekly Q&As that are members only.
Role in jail that is a very cunning character to play. But as someone who spent 10 years in prison myself, he hasn't got me fooled one bit, and I know exactly what he's doing. Seen it time and time again. Lastly, if he goes to prison, there's two major things at play that will guarantee that he kills again. I'll tell you why, and I'll tell you what those things are that nobody else on the internet is talking about, which is crazy. I'll explain everything. Let's get started.
Kitchen, they cooking, and you step right around here, and you got the distillery. What they doing? What y'all got going? Tell us a little bit about what you're doing, huh? Just squeezing the alcohol out.
TikTok in prison, huh? Interesting. And a camera?
Put it on fire, cook it on. All right, then. We lit. We getting tattoos and everything in this bitch. We lit. There he is. There he is. Yeah.
Let's start here just with this article. Nick Reiner almost, quote, childlike in jail. Childlike after parents' alleged murders. Fox Nation documentary reveals A new TMZ Investigates special on Fox Nation claims Nick Reiner is in no mental state to stand trial for the alleged murders of his parents, Rob and Michelle Reiner, as the program reveals new details about his mental state, medication changes, and the case against him. He is not competent to stand trial right now. He is almost childlike in jail, we're told. TMZ executive producer Harvey Levin told Fox and Friends on Monday he can't process the consequences of what he's done. He knows what he did. He just can't understand where he is right now. And I know that sounds crazy, but he is out of his head right now. So you're telling me he can't process the consequences of murdering his parents, but he does know that he did murder his parents. He just can't understand that he's in jail because he murdered his parents.
I kind of think that's BS, honestly. It's just a way to kind of deflect and avoid accountability and consequence, if you ask me. And some people would say, oh, but they would never do that. It's like, yes, they would. Yes, they would do that. They would do anything to try to avoid consequences.
That's the narrative going around in LA, Hollywood, all that. And I've seen plenty of people go to court. I've gone to court several times myself. And then after court, I have seen plenty of people in prison on the exact drug that they are claiming, the same people sticking up for him, using this as an excuse, they are claiming that he dabbled in, which is the real cause of why he committed these murders. That's what they're saying. I've been around criminals for 10 years. That's a decade. 1/3 of the life I've lived on this planet Earth has been spent 24/7, 365 around people who daily either snort methamphetamines or smoke it out of a light bulb. Day after day after day. I am very familiar with what it looks like and what it does to you. And
that's the other thing, right? They'll play dumb. That's a version of trying to avoid accountability and consequences. Other people will claim to be in denial. But Dr. George Simon has a good chapter about this in his book, Character Disturbance. They said, that's not denial. That's responsibility avoidance. That is very different than denial. The example he uses for denial is a woman who is married to a man for 40 years and he gets stage 4 cancer and she just can't accept the diagnosis. He says that is denial because her system is trying to process this soon-to-be catastrophe. But when a criminal or someone does something awful, they claim to not know what they did or they claim to not understand it. That is not denial. That is responsibility avoidance. That is doing something to avoid accountability and consequences. Not the same.
And all the ins and outs of the effects. I know plenty of even violent people who probably ingest more methamphetamine than Nick Reiner does.
Thank you very much for this, Caroline. Thank you for the super sticker. I appreciate you.
Easily, maybe double. And they don't kill people. They don't murder people. They don't slash their throats in their sleep in their bed. So there's that. They're saying Nick Reiner is almost childlike in jail. He doesn't even know where he is.
Yeah, to me, that's more of responsibility avoidance. Thank you very much for the sunshine, lady. I appreciate you too.
That's bullcrap. That's BS. And I know that for a fact. The skincare industry has been lying to women for years, selling you overpriced creams full of chemicals that do nothing but sit on your skin. But the Vans no exceptions. Do I think the substances probably pushed this individual over the edge to carry this out? Yes. But I don't think this came out of nowhere because, again, there's plenty of people who use way more of the same substance than Nick Reiner, and they've never killed anyone and probably never will kill anyone in their life. It was always something deep inside you, and this substance just kind of gave you the oomph to go forward with it. So you were always dangerous and weird and crazy. Oh, he's childlike in jail. He doesn't even know where he's at. Yes, he does. Here's what it is. He spent so much time on hard drugs, methamphetamine, and possibly even bath salts. Now he's been incarcerated for weeks and weeks and weeks. And yes, in the county jail, there's almost no drugs, maybe a little, but very, very rare. I would actually bet money. I'd bet some high stakes that
The reason why there's less in county is a lot of times you go to county and you're awaiting trial for a more serious crime. So you'll be less likely to mess up. But once you're actually in state or federal prison, then you have less fucks to give a lot of times. You have your sentence, and then all of a sudden you're like, well, fuck it. I'm going to do what I want. County, you still got a little hope, or it's usually not going to be a long stay in county. So you'll probably see some better behavior. But that doesn't mean it's safer. I mean, there can still be violence for sure.
he has not even come across someone who has any kind of contraband or drugs to offer him in county jail.
And Anne has gifted a membership. I thank you very much, Anne. Hopefully, I know someone will put that to good use.
You get to prison, entirely different. And a lot of people out there don't understand there's a huge difference between county jail and state or federal prison. Huge difference. Right now, until he goes to trial and gets found guilty and sent to prison, he's in county jail. In that county jail, yeah, there's not much there. And so against his will, he has sobered up. And during that process, he has now forcefully been made to disconnect and dissociate from the individual he was for Lord knows how long, probably years of consistently using meth and other hard drugs and the things he did while using them. For example, slicing the throats of his parents. And you don't snort a line and I'm like, oh my God, I want to go kill somebody. You snort a line and you feel good, you feel great. You go to one of these Hollywood parties, which is what it was, and you're mingling and you're mixing and you're probably getting along just fine. You're talking a lot. You're very upbeat and just so very social, and just all this dopamine is going. And then it starts to wear off. And you've probably been doing this drug for days, and paranoia starts to set in. Now everybody, he's looking at me weird.
So story time with Jared. So one of the first days I got out of rehab when I was 20 years old was one of the first days I ever did heroin. And the guy who picked me up from the rehab was a guy who I met in the rehab, who, of course, like me at the time, wasn't ready to get better. But this guy, he taught me all the ropes of where I am, of how to get it, because back in the day, you got it from people on the street. But he would do crack, and I did dope. And what would always happen to him is he would do it, and he'd get all wide-eyed, and then he would go to the window and just stare out the window for about an hour at a time. And he would say to me, Jared, the feds are out there. And I was like, oh, is that so? Where are they? And he said, they're behind the bushes. I was like, oh, is that so? He goes, yes, I can see their eyes reflecting in the light. And then he'd be like, you want one? Want a hit? And I said, nah, doesn't look like you're having too much fun. But a true story.
Father just said something. That's a little odd that he just said, this movie star woman over here, she just gave me a funny look. Everyone, you know what? I'm starting to think these people are setting me up. Everyone's out to get me. They're planning something. They're plotting something. They want to hurt me. I can't trust any of them. You're all my enemies. Matter of fact, oh man, now I'm getting scared. Whoa, 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 whoa. Hey, back up, back up. Whoa. Hey, what's going on? Now when we have account, he's going around, he's saying things, and he's making these A-list and B-list celebrities uncomfortable at this holiday party that is thrown by Conan O'Brien, one of the top night late show hosts on mainstream television. Hey, whoa, whoa. I got my eye on you. By the way, no one's doing anything to him. He's starting, paranoia is setting in. And so it got so bad to where at the end of the night, he murdered his parents, his mom and dad. And I'll tell you now, I have seen people go into meth psychosis. Nick Reiner, you're just a druggie. You were paranoid from the drugs you did, and you killed someone. And I've also been around many, many other people, again, who have done way more of the same drug for longer than this guy, Nick Reiner, did, and have never killed someone and will probably, for the rest of their life, never, ever kill someone. And so we're not going to blame it on the drug. There's something inside you that the drug made you feel like it's okay to bring out. That's the bottom line. Oh, I don't know where I'm at. You know where you're at. He's forcefully made to be sober, and he's slowly, week by week by week by week, because he's been in there now for months, weeks and months. He's been in there for that long. He's slowly coming back into terms with just a normal, sober mind and realizing, oh my God, I slit the freaking throat of my parents.
And again, we don't even know. We don't know what the toxicology report said. We don't know if he was taking his medicines. We don't know if he was on drugs. We just don't know. We don't know. Was he likely on something? I think it's very likely he might have been on something like meth, for sure. But we don't know for sure.
And he, in his heart, is not able to accept that and be okay with that in his heart, because he did it when he was on drugs. I've met plenty of people who do the same drug he did 2 or 3 times that amount, and they didn't kill anybody. So I don't care. I don't care if you did it because you were high. It was in you, and there's something wrong with you, and it's not just to be blamed on drugs. You're dangerous. Oh, I don't even know where I'm at. I can't stand trial. You can stand trial. You know where you're at. You're in jail. You know where you're at. Give me a break. No. You just can't comprehend and come to terms with the awful things that you have allowed yourself to break down to the level of just depravity that drugs have brought you to, because you can't stop doing them. And now they've caused you to slit your mom and dad's throat in their beds. And now you don't have drugs and alcohol and whatever's out there in LA and Hollywood to distract you from the fact and the actions that you've done. In fact, all you have is a very small room with nothing on the walls, and it invokes your thoughts and it activates your mind and engages your imagination, and you are forced to think about constantly what you've done. And you can't deal with it because now you're sober. You have no escape from the awful things you have done. And so now I don't even know. I can't even comprehend the echo. I don't know. Where am I even at? You're in hell on earth. You're in hell on earth. Enjoy your stay, brother. Do your time.
And again, he's in hell on earth for several reasons, because he's not getting out. He's not getting out for decades, even if he gets the mental health treatment, even if he gets that best case. His life as you know it is over. And if he goes to prison, holy mackerel, they're gonna chew him up and spit him out.
Now, as for why, if he does go to prison, which I really think he will, it's going to be bad. It's going to be bad for somebody in there. He's going to kill again. There's just no way around it. And that's because what we have kind of discussed this entire time, who he becomes when he starts a frequent usage of methamphetamine it activates something that's in him and snaps something in his brain that was already never properly wired in the first place, right? He becomes murderous. And he uses a knife. He has proven already that he will do that and carry that out with a knife. Not only will he do that with a knife, he will do it to you when you're asleep in the bed, dreaming. And two things that there are no shortage of, actually there's a pretty extreme abundance of in prison, is substances, primarily meth, and knives. Even if he doesn't have money, you know, we've learned his big shot lawyer, you know, just took a step back from his case and he's not going to represent him anymore. And it's, you know, kind of 95% confirmed that the reason for that is the family wasn't going to pay for him anymore. You know, they just decided, you know what, we're done with this. Screw this. It took them a little bit to come around, but it's like, you know what? It's the right thing to do. We shouldn't be paying for a lawyer for Nick. And so he's gone. And so, you know, I would assume by that logic, they're not going to just be flooding him with cash. You know, so, oh, well, Nick doesn't have the money to support that habit or to be regularly using meth, right? Even if you don't have money, there's a lot of people in there who they want to pass their time by doing drugs, and they get addicted all over again. And you know, that's what they want to do with their day-to-day life. I mean, you dedicate your entire 24 hours to finding ways to obtain money through odd jobs within the prison. Yes, prison hustles, they call them. You could wash clothes. You could wash other inmates' clothes. You can.
And I think if Nick ever goes to the general population, he's really going to struggle to adapt because he has no skills. He has no skills of something that would actually apply to the prison world. Has he ever had a real job? I don't think so. He's going to be a fish out of water, and he's just going to not know up from down, left from right. And he's going to have a big target on his back too. People are going to try to exploit him for things. At best, he might have some people kind of love bomb him to see what they can get out of him. At best.
Clean their cell. If you know how to cook, you can cook them food because they don't feel like it and they'll pay you. They want you to hold their cell phone. Oh, we got a tip. There's a big shakedown happening tomorrow. I don't want to get caught with this cell phone. I don't want to get caught with this knife. It's a big charge. You hold it and you hide it.
And that's one thing they'll use him for too. They'll try to tell him, oh, you need to hold these drugs, or you need to hold this, hold that. And they'll take advantage of him. And then they'll like the cell will get shaken down and Nick Reiner will be caught with them. He'll be like, but I said it for this guy. And then he'll get even more trouble in the prison world for snitching. And they'll probably kick the crap out of him.
If you get caught, it's yours. It ain't mine. And whether you get caught or don't get caught, here's your payment. Here's your bag of meth. That's just one of, I mean, there's just so many odd jobs, you know, so many odd jobs to be done that don't really require an outside source funding you financially and putting money on your books to where you're able to actually just transactionally pay for this with some type of funds and money and commissary.
Perhaps, Livin, I need to do a better job at selling myself and pushing for the likes and subscriptions, memberships, super chats. I'm getting better at it. It's always just never been my thing. It kind of feels cringe to me sometimes, but I've had to learn that now that's just part of the deal. Part of the deal is doing those things and kind of getting over the cringe factor of it. But I still try to have a balance. But I appreciate you doing it for me as well, Livin.
Money. So my point is, he seems like the type of fella who's sure going to dedicate his day to whatever way he needs to obtaining meth in there. And there's plenty in there to obtain. He will be on it. He will have access to a knife. And ultimately, he's going to have a cellmate who goes to sleep and has to sleep in that room. And that's a 1 + 2 + 3. I mean, you got three very familiar factors here. You telling me he's not going to do it again to somebody? He'd do it to his own parents. There's that. There's my prediction. Let me know what you think. Other than that, I'll see you next time when there's another update. Nick.
This is Hidden Killers Live with Tony Bruschi, Stacey Cole, and Todd Michaels.
Lots of cases that we have been covering here, and you guys have a lot of questions, and we have a lot of answers.
Heather, thank you very much for this, Heather. I appreciate you and all of your contributions to the chat here. You're awesome.
Because we're Radio Shack. No, we have, the same sort of answers, that we've been talking about. We have insight. We have, opinions just like you guys. We're going to discuss a lot of the cases that we've been covering here over the last several weeks that we're continuing to cover. We're going to do 3 different ones today: the Reiner murders, the Tepe case.
So when I listened to these 4 people, the first person was a defense lawyer, Brian Etten, and Maureen. Like, Maureen's more of like the law enforcement side. And then the jumpsuit Pablo, he is the former criminal, the ex-convict, talks about things from prison. And now we've graduated to the prosecutor, Tony Bruschi.
And also the new civil suit that the families are bringing against WSU in regards to the Brian Kohberger situation. And you are welcome to weigh in the comment section as we go through this today with your questions. We're going to really focus on getting to them, discussing them, and going through it. Today, we're going to start out with the Reiner case. We're going to be doing something a little different here. Stacey, Todd, and me. We're going to be answering those questions. So throw them out there. Look, none of us are lawyers. None of us are psychiatrists or police or anything like that. So we're going to do our best to just kind of give you our honest take on where we individually think various aspects of these cases are going. It's a tragic case, the Reiner case. It's hitting on addiction, mental illness, family dynamics, wealth, enabling, the limits of love, all of it. So let's get to some of those questions that you guys have been posting out there on our videos. And as we go through this today live, please do post yours as well. So let's start out here. Rob and Michelle spent years and a fortune trying to save Nick Reiner. 17 rehab stints. Some say maybe even more than that. That's what we know of. That's what's on the record. Then there's the movie, keeping him in the guest house. The question here is, at what point does helping become enabling? Because it sounds like they never cut him off and now they're dead. I'm not saying it's their fault, but I wonder if parents in that situation can ever win. That is the question that our first one here posed on YouTube. I don't know. What do you guys think about this? Could they have won in this situation? Is there anything that they would have looked back on and said, I would have done this differently? What do you guys think, Stacey?
I'm going to tap in here. First of all, forgive me. I'm a little emotional today. I got a cat thing going on. But I'm going to flip the script a little bit on you, Tony. Because Todd and I don't have children. We have fur babies. Yeah. So you have a child. And I don't want you to go too deep into the scenario, but let's put you in Rob's position. Say your daughter is going off the fucking rails. And I just used the F-bomb. Sorry, I haven't had much sleep. What do? Do you can't just cut your child off. You just can't. And that parental pull is in there so strong, so hard. How do you just say, I can't keep doing this anymore? I don't know that some parents can do it ever. I'll
address it. Todd, what are your thoughts?
Well, I'm interested in hearing your take on it because I can only look at this from somebody who's been in relationships and maybe been in a relationship with somebody who was an addict and how difficult that was. This
Todd character, he seems like a new person. I don't think we've listened to him before.
Situation, found myself putting up with more than I probably should have for a long time. And
especially if you love somebody.
Right. And so at some point I did say, okay, enough's enough. I got to look out for me. But that's a different animal. It's not being a parent. It's not your child. It's not somebody you're bringing into the world. So I'm really interested in hearing what you would have to say if you were in the situation.
First of all, the dynamic is extremely different. And it's a dynamic you don't understand until you made a person.
Yeah.
It just is. It is what it is. I mean, I didn't know how that felt until I was 30 and I had my daughter. And I don't know. I mean, I don't think it kicks in everybody. I certainly think it kicked in the Reiners.
Tony Bruschi is one of those people that, like, it's hard to imagine him as a younger person. It's like he's born as a 25-year-old and then started from there. Kind of like Morgan Freeman or Larry David.
They were there, come hell or high water for Nick. But I think healthy brains, healthy parents, it kicks in and it's like a switch. It flips. And suddenly, the world that is about you, and even the most giving philanthropist, you can be the most empathetic person, but there's an element where the world is still about you.
Right.
When you make the person and you have the person, that's gone. It's just like boom, gone. I mean, there's elements, but your free time, your free energy, all of that, it's gone. I mean, you are now focusing on that person and making sure that they are going to, be cared for and have everything they need, up and through them getting through the house at the age of 18 and then after, because you love your kid. No matter what age, they're still going to be your kid, no matter what. But I mean, there's a lot of parallels that are similar to being in a relationship with someone that you love and you care about, but there certainly is a different bond there when it's like part you. It just is. So I do not blame the Reiners in any way, shape, or form for them doing every damn thing that they possibly could. And there's two parallel worlds I think you can look at here with that. You can be on the outside and you can say, they should have done this. They should have done that. They should have been more strict. They should have, coulda, shoulda, woulda. And you can be that parent and you can know damn well that those people are right. You can agree with them. You can make those same judgment calls on somebody else's kid too.
Right.
But when it's your own and when you're you're that close to the fire, you're willing to be burned alive by it if it's going to shield your kid first from being burned, even if they're going to get toasted too. You'll go first because you'll give them that extra little bit of time. And I think that's really where the Reiners were. I think their situation is really difficult because they thought they were getting the expert advice from people, and some of it was good advice. It's not all the treatment here that was bad. There certainly, I think, probably was some treatment that might have been questionable in what they were getting. But I think for the most part, everything, was on the up and up. Treatment requires two things. It requires, number one, obviously the treatment to be carried out in a responsible way. And then it requires participation. Just putting the person there and having them exist is not treatment. They have to willingly participate. And Nick clearly never did. Rob and Michelle.
And that's the difficult part, right? As a parent, there's only so much you can do if your child isn't willing to pick up the ball and start doing something for themselves. And again, I totally acknowledge when there's mental health and addiction involved, it makes everything harder. But had to start somewhere. I think getting clean for him and staying clean would have been a great start. But he needed something to address some of his character stuff. Whether it was smart recovery or a 12-step program, that really would have helped him. And if you believe reports, they said he was stabilized for 5 years on a med. And then he wanted to stop taking that med because of weight gain. Well, once you go off the rails, when you stop taking that med, don't you think you'd go back on the med just to restabilize? But they didn't. And again, I also think if weight gain was his problem, to the addict's brain, they would think, well, how could I lose weight quickly? Meth, great weight loss program. Maybe she's born with it. Maybe it's methamphetamine.
Clearly did. They were being part of that treatment. But if the person who needs it is not going to participate, you're screwed. But that doesn't end your love or your care for that kid. And it sounds like they did try to put up boundaries at some points. It sounds like they did try to say, okay, good luck. Hopefully you're going to go out there in the world and you're going to come back alive. And he did most of the time. but they knew, and I can't imagine going through that. I can't imagine sitting there every day knowing your kid is homeless on the streets and using and out of control, and you're just waiting every day for that call to come in saying, we found him behind the dumpster, he OD'd.
Yeah.
And they were also given little glimpses along the way of good times, right? When he seemed to be off drugs, when the medications that he was on seemed to be working, like they had glimpses of some good times with him. And I'm sure that made them want to hold on to the hope even longer. It's, they're those little pieces that kind of came into the fray with them. And when you get that little bit of hope, you're willing to hold on a little bit longer. And a little bit longer.
Kills you.
Yeah. Which is what keeps people in abusive and shitty relationships.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
It's that exact same thing. It's it's good. And a lot of addicts and some mentally ill, depending on what is the affliction is. Personality disorders, I should say more specifically. Personality disorders are, because there's two different things. Personality disorders and mental illness, they are different things.
Correct.
And a lot of people don't know that. I didn't know that for a long time.
I would agree with that. Mental illness, this is a debate amongst the community, mind you. Dr. Mark Eatonson would say, no, narcissism is mental illness. I don't know about that one. But mental illness would be bipolar, an anxiety disorder, schizophrenia. Those would be considered mental illnesses. Personality disorders, borderline, narcissism, antisocial, histrionic, in particular, that's different. Even the dependent personality disorders, I wouldn't consider that a mental illness either. Personality disorders, A, B, or C cluster, they're different.
But they are very different. And the personality disorder type folks, which I would guess Nick probably has some of that going on. They manipulate and they know how to flip that script pretty quick. Mm-hmm. They can sense when the rope is getting short, when everybody's tolerance for them is getting low. And suddenly, and they know, okay, better back this up a little bit so I get some of that trust back and I get a little bit more of that rope to screw with everyone's life on. And then once you think, oh, things are going good, it looks like they're participating in their recovery or whatever it may be. They're just getting better. Then boom, chaos comes back in. And then the rest of us are on the line that are like trying to help and be the caregivers, unfortunately, then we're just yanked around for that roller coaster. And more times than not, the reality is, and this is a scary stat, it's the caregiver that dies before the person they're actually caring for. Mm-hmm. And that's true not only like in an addict type situation or a mental illness type situation, it's especially true in an elderly type situation where you have some folks that are up there in age, 80s, 90s, as a spouse. Quite often it's the initially healthy spouse that's taking care of the unhealthy spouse that ends up dying before the one who had the initial ailment.
Right.
Because of, all the stress and everything that goes into doing that. And look, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that or they shouldn't do that by any means. That's, it's kind of your plight if you're
sometimes the enabler / codependent, they do get more stressed out because they're just taking care of the addict. That's the proper use of the term codependent, by the way. Someone who is codependent on the substance that the addict is. So whether the addict is an alcoholic or a drug addict, whatever, the spouse would be codependent on the substance. That's the correct usage of the term codependent.
There with that person, and if you don't have another outside source to give the care, but it can kill you. It can easily kill you. In this sort of case with Reiner, obviously it wasn't just natural death of stress that killed them, it was Nick killed them. But yeah, it can certainly take you down some roads that I don't think anyone ever sees coming with people like this. So could they have won at the end of the day when we look at the story or the question? No, not under the current situation. They had the conservatorship for that year And I think we learned. Were you guys surprised by just how insane the conservatorship laws are?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's literally, it's set up to the place where if you get the conservatorship, if you follow through with the conservatorship and you provide housing, you provide food, you do anything, you basically take that person from a catatonic state off the street drooling where they're going to die because they can't feed themselves, because feeding is a prerequisite or basically a disqualifier from the conservatorship. If you feed them, that disqualifies the conservatorship. So if you follow through, you get the conservatorship, you get the person on a good path. After a year, it goes away. If you're checking the boxes, you can't keep it going, even though that person very likely still needs that in place so they don't go off the rails. It's designed to continue throwing people off the rails.
Because if you succeed, it doesn't work anymore. So what's the point of, I mean, you're damned if you do and damned if you don't. I don't get that.
Exactly.
And also, they could not win at all because basically two things were going to happen. Either this outcome was going to happen because he was on those rails in that direction, or he was going to be on the street alone and die. So if you talk about could they ever win? No, it was going to be a bad outcome any way you look at it.
Yeah. I mean, the only, and look, I mean, they seem to be exhausting every option they could think of. So who knows what else they would have come up with, in-home care, maybe that would have been the next step, but I don't know. I mean, that's a little different when you're dealing with an addict and something, like to have that's more so for elder care or, something of that nature. There's not like a lot of in-home addict care that go. I don't think anybody really be signing up for that career path.
I was just gonna say.
I certainly wouldn't.
Would you like to do this for the rest of your life? Like, no, I don't think so. So, I mean, again, I think they were damned if they do, damned if they don't. I don't know what could have changed in this situation. He was mentally ill. I believe he probably has personality disorders. He used, which then exacerbated all of those problems 10 times worse. So no, I mean, as long as.
So again, he could be having many things: schizoaffective disorder. He could have vulnerable narcissism, psychopathy, maybe even still some undiagnosed autism. I mean, there's a little bit of that vibe. I don't know if that vibe I was picking up was really just schizoaffective. But either way, not just schizoaffective, that's for sure. There's character issues, personality disorder issues, almost without a doubt.
Nick was not going to participate. They were fucked.
Yeah.
I think that's just kind of the end of it. I mean, was there a path for Nick to be better? Yes, but Nick had to choose to go down it, and Nick said no.
Somebody was going to die at his hands. Somebody somewhere.
The only person that was going to stop that was Nick.
Yeah.
And he chose not to. Sarah in Atlanta, I keep seeing people online compare this to the Menendez brothers, and I don't get it at all. The Menendez case had allegations of abuse and planning. This looks impulsive. An argument at the party, drugs, schizophrenia. Why are we even making that comparison other than rich kid kills rich parents in LA? I agree. I don't know that there is really a parallel here other than in title alone.
Do you see one, Stacey?
Oh, I don't know that this was impulsive. I think just my gut says this was something he's thought about. He thought about this.
Correct. I think this was simmering for a long time. See the first video we went over from Joe the lawyer about what his friend said. Nick is an entitled monster. Lots of anger, bitterness, and resentment towards his parents, hated the fame. And again, he said there was something deeply troubling and disturbing about him. So if that's how he felt in 2009, I don't think this was very impulsive. There might have been a straw that broke the camel's back situation with the conservatorship, but I think he was nurturing a resentment for a long time, and he finally said, fuck it, I'm going to do it. And he did.
On several occasions. I just don't think you wake up one day and think you're going to kill your millionaire parents.
Thought about or planned, because that's two kind of different things. I mean, it's like one thing to be, and here's an example. let's just say someone is going through a divorce. Let's just say it's nasty and you don't like each other and you have really nasty thoughts about the other person being pecked to death by a pack of wild geese at a park. And let's say in that fantasy, it's kind of like Home Alone and you're the lady with the birdseed and they're filled with glue and you're like just throwing the shit out there and they get pecked to death. I'm not saying there's anyone in this conversation right now that may have or have not had.
I never said anything about him being pecked to death. Do not put words in my mouth.
About you. Why are you making this go to you? I don't.
How on earth did we get here talking about him getting pecked to death?
Let's just say, okay, so whatever the scenario may be, it's probably not being pecked to death by geese, but let's just say you have those thoughts because you're just kind of in rage mode and you're fuming and you're trying to process this shit. And that's where, most of us will have thoughts of some sort of not good nature for the other person. Especially for a moment wronged. In time.
Yes,
exactly.
You've been horribly wronged.
It's human. And in 99.9%, nobody acts it out. It's too difficult to get geese lined up like that. I've tried it. The local geese dealers, the parks departments are not cool with this sort of shit.
They poop a lot.
Exactly. So there's hindrances. But that's where it is. It's just a thought. And then there's, well, let's figure out his or her schedule and let's stalk them down. And then let's have a pack of 42 geese in the back of the van that I rented from Menards, ready.
If I didn't know any better, am I tripping right now? A flock of 42 geese in a van?
To fly out of there and attack at a moment's notice when I discover them picking up dinner from the Chick-fil-A, that's planning. That's premeditated. That's planning. Obviously, it's a very ridiculous situation. But it sounds better than like stalking someone in a driveway when we're talking a hypothetical.
Yeah.
So one is planned. One is.
That reminds me of those sayings, right? Why did we drive in a parkway and park in a driveway? And there's more that I can't remember right now.
Just there. To me, I feel like Nick was probably more on the first, where it's like fantasy of going after anybody that wronged him in his mind or told him no or whatever. And somewhere along the line there, I'm going to guess it wasn't just the med change. My conjecture here would be med change and using, and I'm going to guess meth, as a lot of people have, that sparked anger. And then that moved, essentially, he kind of drug that fantasy down, if you're envisioning a computer, from just somewhere on the desktop into the actionable category. And suddenly, boom, we're doing this. Sparked by the drugs and the byproduct of a med change at the same time. That's kind of where I'm at with him.
I would tend to agree with that a little bit. I don't know if it was really all that planned.
Yeah.
But I think he always had it in the back of his mind that something could happen. And
it was an option.
And I agree with that. I don't know how specific the plan was, but he knew what it was. And he had that hotel room that he ordered, as far as we know. He knew what it was, and he knew to clean up, and he knew to try to get out. That's what we do know, I believe.
It was an option, right? In order to get out of all the stuff that his parents were putting him through and asking him to do, and all the meds and blah, blah, blah. I think I think you're right, Tony. In the back of his mind, it was something that it might be an outcome that he could live with, if you pardon the pun.
Like it's there. Yeah.
Right.
And it got accessed under other circumstances. If you take the using out of it, again, we don't know if he was at the moment in time. That'll come out. But I don't know that the med change was enough to fuel this. Was it part of the recipe? Probably, but I mean, the using might have been enough too. After you've had, I mean, and it didn't take into consideration too. This brain has been fried 50 times to Tuesday,
Right.
So it's you know, it's already had its damage done, so it's not going to necessarily operate as it should, even on a good day. So I think there's a lot of factors at play there.
Do we know if the Menendez brothers, if they were drug users? I don't remember.
I don't believe that was ever part of the case. And I don't know the answer to that question for sure, but I don't believe that was ever brought up as part of it. I mean, one of the big thing with Menendez was the lack of remorse. That's what really a lot of people hang their hats on with them to this day.
It's the big thing about the Menendez cases. Chat, what do you think? Was he truly abused by the parent? Or is that just a way to avoid accountability? Or was it emotional abuse? Was it SA? Like, what do you think about the case? There's a lot of debate about it. As far as the court system and the law is concerned, they've been in jail since what? The late 80s or early 90s, and they haven't changed their minds yet. But for sake of argument, imagine they were SA'd. What should be the proper recourse in that? If you were SA'd, should you be allowed to kill them and just get a self-defense? It becomes an iffy area though, right? Because, okay, on one hand, it's self-defense, but on the other hand, can you always just be allowed to kill the person who's doing it? I don't know. That's a tough question.
You know, Coffindaffer does, and we disagree on that case quite a bit, where they didn't show remorse. They you know, it's on the record with some witnesses that they were kind of bragging about it, that they were kind of gleeful, you know, and they went on the spending spree and they were living it up after the parents were dead.
But in light of what we know now about potential sexual abuse, you can understand those feelings, right?
If I was being raped by my father and it was, you know, an ongoing thing for years, and I know that he'd been doing it to other people too, and it reached the breaking point and I killed him, and I suddenly had access to his funds, I'd probably be going on a shopping spree too. I don't know that I'd be all that heartbroken.
Exactly.
You know, I mean, does that make you an evil monster? No. It's not healthy, without a doubt, that someone did that and then, you know, was able to just kind of move along.
Songbits Coffindaffer is my favorite word to say. But this is not Jennifer Coffindaffer. This is Stacey Cole.
The path of life like that, it's probably not the best way to go about it. It's how they did, but does it make them evil? No, I mean, I think it's you put people in horrible circumstances and you abuse the shit out of them. Yeah, they're not going to act normal.
It's like what Whitney Houston said. It's not right, but it's okay.
I'm gonna make it anyway. It's not right. You just said that so I would go into song.
Damn right.
That's right.
Damn it.
You didn't know this, but Stacey and I had a bet off the air how long it would take before you started singing.
See, I thought it was going to be Michael Jackson, but
what would have been the cue for Michael Jackson?
Oh, who knows where we'd go?
I didn't know if there was like a saying or like a phrase in the story.
Does there ever need to be? I mean, Tony just goes off into Michael Jackson land sometimes.
Here's the most important thing for anybody out there listening. You are not alone.
Oh my God.
I am here with you.
Not a bad singing voice by Tony Bruschi there. A man of many talents. A hidden talent. I wouldn't expect that from him.
Creepy video where there's a shirt off in it. Yeah, that.
I forgot about
Michael
that.
Jackson
Thank you. Thank you.
And then Lisa Marie Presley's in it too, and he's like in a theater. It was I liked that song. That was a good song from the history.
See, this is what we deal with behind the scenes because we're all radio people, and
it's my brain going everywhere.
Yeah, and I relate to everything.
You know, Babe, it's a good question about Michael Jackson. If he was essaying the kids, I used to think for sure, and then I started looking into it more. I listened to Macaulay Culkin's thing about it, and his explanation was trying to help Macaulay, and I was like, you know what? Like maybe not. I think he was guilty of absolutely being a creeper, But is it illegal being a creeper? I don't know. It's I'm up in the air on it.
Everything in songs, so everything has a soundtrack to it.
Yeah.
So,
but seriously, I mean, honest to God, I mean, I know I kind of said it as a joke, but
and that's a good tool for people to use too. On a side note, like, what is the theme song of you? Like, if you were to walk into a room, what song would they play? Or if there was a soundtrack to your life, what would that soundtrack be? And it's pretty interesting to think about. But you can answer that in the chat.
The impact, the reaction that we've been getting for weeks on this story from you guys out there, and people not being alone in this. Thank you guys for sharing your stories, because I think there's a lot of people who are hearing everybody's comments and hearing a lot of people have reached out with their stories and shared them online, either on our Substack or on YouTube. And there's a lot of people that are this is resonating with, and they're feeling, okay, I'm not alone. So if it empowers people to be more bold, or to make decisions that maybe not be the easiest to make, I hope in some way it's helped, because it's not a rich people problem. It's not a poor people problem. It's an every person problem. And anybody who's dealing with people like this, it's all too real and all too difficult to deal with. So
it's very isolating. And I think what we've seen is that a lot of people are freaking out because there aren't, no resources for people to go to. And while some communities do have some good outreach, for the most part, people are hitting brick walls. They cannot get the help that they desperately want. It's not that they need the help, they want the help and they can't get it. Yes.
You're exact, and there's a limit to the help that they can get.
Yep.
And the reality is, with something like this, their hands are tied at the end of the day, because the person who needs the help has to want the help, and they're usually the least likely to want it and to accept it. So you can have the army of people outside, but if that one person is still saying no, and they can demonstrate that they can house or feed themselves, well, according to California, they're A-okay in their book. So yeah, it's if anything, this case, I said it from the first video we did, let this be a learning experience. Let this expose how broken our system is for everyone who doesn't know that. And maybe this can start to be a path to get some change going on, because this affects far too many people and they scream it to the wind.
And the change I would like to see is, and hopefully every state could do something like this, if you're a danger to yourself or others, you need to be committed against your will for longer than 72 hours. I would say indefinitely, until you are no longer a danger to yourself or others. This also might have saved that woman Irina on the train in North Carolina. I think there does need to be something like that in place. Now, it has to be right. You can't be willy-nilly about it. You can't be abusing that system, but it's to save lives and to keep the rest of society safe. But what else would you like to see happen in society? What do you think we can learn from this case?
Every day. And people don't like to dive too deep into it because it's icky and it's uncomfortable, and nobody wants to think about their family being like this. And it just kind of gets buried. And then those who are closest, who are going to fight to the death, are kind of left alone and isolated. So.
There are a lot of families like this. And as I was watching the Reiner situation, I've got a brother who is an addict, and he was functional, but the amount of torment that he placed upon all of us was immense. And he was a thriving adult. He made a lot of money. He also got busted by the DEA. They showed up one morning with a battering ram and burst into his house and grabbed him. He was making generic Viagra before it was a thing.
Have a side hustle making making ED drugs in their basement, I mean.
Yeah. But this was
how do you even do that? Like, where do you go to get the supplies to make generic Viagra and why?
Somebody in Belize was doing something with him, and that's about as far as I can go into detail, but there was a lot going on there.
Yeah.
And it was just this driving force into everything that he did, every holiday that we got together. he was always off doing something else. And this was well before, cell phones and technology. So who knows who he was talking to on my mom's phone. And he was trying to pull all of us into it. And it just becomes the focal point of the family. It's no longer this family unit that gets together and has hot chocolate on Christmas. It's what's Steve doing in the corner right now?
Yeah.
Who's he talking to?
Look what Nick did. I mean, he normalized this so much they made a fucking movie about it. And in the movie, the people who are trying to save him are the villains. And it's like, looking at it now, it's just this horrifying thing to think about. But it's like, God damn, the power of the manipulative addict.
They take over the entire family.
And it's insidious. And it's slow building. It's the frog in the pot.
Yep.
I've never boiled a frog in a pot. That's a weird analogy that people make a lot, but
yeah, they do.
I mean, I get the lobster one. I've done lobsters before, but I try to kill them first.
So the frog in a boiling pot analogy is an analogy of abuse, where they say a trauma bond is just like that. When you're in an abusive relationship, if you throw a frog in a pot of water that's boiling already, it jumps right out. But if you put a frog in a pot of water and slowly turn up the heat, it doesn't jump out and it boils to death. And the analogy is abusive relationships are very rarely abusive from the start. It doesn't happen overnight, doesn't happen right away, usually starts with love bombing, but slowly but surely the devaluing will come. And then maybe they'll be more critical. They'll start to put you down, insult you, tell you you can't do anything right. And then it culminates with them blaming you for everything, being abusive in many ways. And they call this the frog in a boiling pot analogy of abuse, because at that point, the water is boiling. You're already in boiling water. Didn't start boiling, but now that you're boiling, you're in a terrible situation.
Who's boiling frogs?
What kind of crazy bastard are you that you take a live animal and put it into a boiling pot? And I know we do that with lobsters, but what are you doing with frogs?
Yeah, I don't know. I like frogs. Like I have two that swim in my pool, and I enjoy it. Like I swim with them.
Cute.
I'm not even kidding. It's like they go out there, they live in like a little area, and I don't know how they survive in the salt water, but they do.
They do.
I've removed them a gazillion times thinking it will hurt them, but they just keep coming back. So I'm like, okay, well, you're part of the pool now. And so we swim together. I swear to God, it's kind of funny. When I've been out there in summer, swim around, I'll be hanging out. Sometimes I'll just be sitting by the edge of the pool with my phone, because, I can't relax without staring at my screen. And then right behind me, there's the frog, just like over my shoulder, kind of like hanging out like a dog. And I'm not even kidding. It's crazy. But again, it's like, no, they don't have a name. I should name them. I wonder if Harper has. But they're just, they're neat little creatures. And I can't imagine boiling one, Hey, I'm hungry. Your lunch. Bye.
Oh, and somebody in our comment stuff said, people eat frog legs. Yes. Hopefully they're not alive when they're being cooked. Hopefully. Tony, you're the chef here.
Well, sometimes I've been in my pool and I have gotten hungry, and that's why there's only one frog now.
Oh, Bruce, hang on. Bruce says,
Tony Bruschi has the giggles in this one. I did research this. If you put a frog in a pot and turn up the heat, what did he say? What am I saying? The guy's saying my quotes. Bruce Miller. Is Bruce Miller a fan of the show here?
I did research.
Nah, a lot of people know this analogy.
This, if you put a frog in a pot and turn up the heat, the frog will jump out when it gets hot. Useful metaphor. Yes. Recipe for frog soup. No.
There you go, everybody. Anyone who is sitting here watching this as there is a massive winter blizzard about to blanket half of the country, if you were thinking about making frog soup, now you know the answer. Not a good idea. Stick with the cream of mushroom.
The cream of mushroom. Oh boy, I don't want to hear any jokes about that. No siree, Bob. Let's see here. How did the Reiner stop seeing the threat?
This is the Big Breakdown, a long look back at some of the biggest stories we're covering for you.
Psychology of Nick Reiner, trying to understand the schizoaffective disorder that's going on, maybe why he's thinking this is a conspiracy. We're also going to dive into the family.
By the way, chat, I'm excited to tell you that Siobhan Scott here, I was looking for her, and it turns out she already follows me on Instagram, so that should be easy enough to reach out to her. So to have her on the show.
System, how the Reiners became trapped in this cycle that they could not escape. And we're also going to dive into the system that failed him, the treatment, the autonomy, and why 18 rehabs did not seem to be enough to keep Nick Reiner in a safe place or those around him. Siobhan, welcome. I always look forward to our conversations. Let's just jump in with the schizoaffective disorder itself. It combines features of schizophrenia, delusions, hallucinations, disorganized thinking with mood disorder symptoms like mania and depression. It sounds like a living hell for anyone who may have this. And it is a very real thing. For people who aren't familiar with the diagnosis, what does daily life look like for someone trying to manage this condition? And how does it differ from just schizophrenia alone?
It's hell for people trying to manage it. The thinking problems interfere with their perception of the world. They don't know what's real, what's not real. If they're having delusions and hallucinations, it's incredibly unpleasant. Nobody would ever say, oh, gee, I'm going to fake schizophrenia. I just want to have this. You know, it's a terrible disease. It impacts every part of their life. And then when you throw in the mood disorder, which is the affective part of schizoaffective, that means they have incredible times of depression. And then they can go into mania, which means, you know, people often think of mania as the happy manic, right? The bipolar, oh, when they're manic, they're happy. No, a lot of times they become irritable, paranoid, agitated, they pace. And so when you put those two conditions together, you've got somebody that is going to be very hard to treat, even without the substance abuse. But then you throw the substance abuse in, particularly meth, as we've said, that impacts the brain even more. And so I can understand why stints in rehab, even very good rehabs, this is going to be a person who maybe it just never works for them.
How prevalent in society is somebody with this kind of disorder? Is this a rare thing, or is this, wow, they are everywhere in our world? I just don't have a concept of how prevalent this is.
Yeah. I would have to look up data on schizoaffective disorder. I'm going to guess about 3%.
Okay.
You know, it's not terribly common, but because of the meth epidemic, we are seeing a lot more that's meth induced. When we look at, you know, the non-drug induced condition, there's genetics involved. They've inherited this from someone. It was in their genes from the get-go.
Correct. So I think there's a meth epidemic. There was an opiate epidemic. And I think there's an epidemic of narcissism, and at the very least narcissistic traits. For both reasons, the genes are being passed down, and behaviorally, there seems to be a lot of people acting that way. Look no further than social media on any important topic. You see all sorts of narcissistic behaviors. They might not all be a full-blown narcissist, but there's certainly a lot of narcissistic traits. And it seems like a lot of narcissistic operating systems too. It just does.
And there are times when the brain is developing rapidly in late adolescence, early 20s, when it usually starts to manifest. And that's also about the age when people are experimenting with meth. And I say meth because that is the most toxic to the brain, that is proven over and over to cause psychosis. And so some people have a meth-induced psychosis that's later diagnosed as schizophrenia or schizoaffective disorder. And we don't really ever have a way of taking apart, would they have developed this if they had not used the drugs? So it's kind of a mess. And I think when we see the homeless population on the street, particularly people who are committing violent crime, so much of it is meth induced. And we're seeing a lot of that. So it's hard to sift it all apart.
Is this something, because obviously Nick has a long pattern, 17 years here from the first, documented rehab stay to the tragedy that they're dealing with today. But 2020 was when he was diagnosed with a schizoaffective disorder. Is this something where he likely had it all of his life and it was finally recognized at a certain point in time? Or was it something where this was, I know you just kind of said it's difficult to identify the chicken before the egg here, but is this something where it could have been brought on more by the drug use, or just more so exacerbate an existing problem that maybe existed but wasn't to the height to which it got, but it has always just been kind of there, and this gave it the water to grow?
Yeah, the majority of people with schizophrenia or schizoaffective, the symptoms become really obvious in their late teens into their 20s, but it can happen later and it can happen earlier. And so you can see children, I've seen children as young as 8 diagnosed with childhood schizophrenia, and that's younger. And a lot of times in the early years, the symptoms are not as overt. We call it the prodromal symptoms, the symptoms that happen earlier. And that's a kid who may just be very odd. And often they have social problems. They may have a lot of strange beliefs, but it's not really flagged. They're noticed as an odd kid, but they're not.
What I would be curious about, and if I have Siobhan on the show, this is what I'll ask her. What's the difference between that version of schizoaffective that could be diagnosed in a kid versus someone with autism? What are you going to see differently between those two things? That's what I'm curious about.
Not acutely psychotic yet. And so it's hard to say at what age this may have actually started to manifest for him. I have seen in some of the buzz online that he was having problems as young as 8 years old. And so that makes me think early onset, and that the condition could have been there, from the get-go and manifested later. It could be that without the substance abuse piece, it never would have gotten severe because, it's on a continuum. People can be mildly schizophrenic or moderately or extremely, and it might not have progressed to the extent.
Fact of the matter is, any mental health issue you have, mental illness, will only get worse with meth. Now, a lot of people with ADHD, they will self-medicate with stimulants, but even for them, their life is still going to be unmanageable on meth. Very, very, very rare do you ever see any good outcomes on meth for prolonged use. You just don't. And it's going to make whatever underlying conditions you already have, bipolar, schizophrenia, schizoaffective, whatever it is, cluster B personality disorders, it's going to make everything worse and exasperate it. Guaranteed.
It did without the substance abuse. But that's what makes it really hard to treat. And those are people, when we look at the prognosis for them, it's not necessarily very good.
How difficult is it to find a baseline in somebody that is actively using illicit drugs with schizophrenic disorder, like the schizoaffective disorder, like Nick has? We're talking all those years, so 17 years, where he's going through treatment after treatment. He's in there for 30 days. He gets clean and then gets back onto drugs. How difficult is it to recognize, okay, there's this disorder at play here versus this is the addiction at work, to treat if there's never really a clear long-term path where he's clean?
Yeah, it's pretty impossible to know who he would be without the substances.
Mhm.
And it's unfortunate.
And think also when they were being used. If they're being used during your developmental years, and I think he started at what, 14? And all throughout his teenage years he used, that's got to impact the developmenting brain. And that's something I want to ask Siobhan. It's something I want to ask maybe even Dr. Salerno if he knows. What does that do? Can you give yourself an impairment of empathy from doing that? I don't know the answer to that question, but it'd be very interesting. Does it mimic other conditions? That would be very interesting, but it doesn't help. It certainly doesn't help. And what you need is a stable baseline. And again, maybe Nick had that perhaps with that med that they said he was on for 5 years and stabilized. I don't know if I buy that, but that's what they're saying. But that's what's necessary. You need that clean and stable.
Fortunately, really common to see this sort of thing. I mean, it's not as common. It's not like everybody has somebody like this in their neighborhood. But if you work in an inpatient program, you see this where it's just intransigent. There's a word that when I worked in community mental health, they used to term, oh, somebody's a frequent flyer. And it's because treatment just wasn't effective and they kept coming back and coming back and coming back.
Mm-hmm. I'm reading it.
A frequent flyer. That's a good word for people that go to rehab repeatedly. There's a lot of frequent flyers because a lot of people who aren't addicts, they think a rehab is just going to be like a magic wand. You go to rehab for 30 days and you're good. No. The people that go to rehab, they get out of it what they put in, period. And I'd be a fan of longer term facilities, especially if you're younger. Go for like 3 months to 6 months minimum. They have the best results. But that requires a lot of buy-in.
Was 0.3% to 1% of the population. It's relatively rare if that's exactly what he's got.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing about addicts as well is you meet people at a place like AA, NA, or even Smart Recovery, and you meet a lot of people that have a similar backstory to you. Oh, parents were kind of similar. Lots of anxiety and depression or neurodivergence. So it's kind of like a flock of black sheep in a way, where there's a lot of people that have different kinds of stories. Some of them have been the scapegoat. Some of them have been the golden child. Probably more scapegoats, though, if I had to guess. But you see a little bit of everything in those places.
Yeah, that sounds
diagnosed
about right.
though. I'm curious because we see stats like this all the time, where it's like it's this percentage, it's that's that percentage. In your experience, I'm always curious here. What's the realistic number? What's the number if everyone who truly had this were recognized and diagnosed? How much higher do these percentages go in your opinion, in reality, if everyone was truly being diagnosed?
Point. That's an excellent point, because as I have talked about in my family history in my book, I had an aunt with clearly schizophrenia who lived with us off and on because she couldn't function. She was never diagnosed until very late in life. I think she was in her 60s before she was diagnosed, but she was having hallucinations and delusions the whole time, her entire life. And nobody got it. Nobody got it. They thought she was just difficult. They called her, the old-fashioned term, she was ornery. She was ornery. She was just causing trouble all the time. And people didn't understand mental illness. This was in the 60s and 70s, and nobody ever diagnosed her. So there's probably a lot of people who have a difficult family member that they don't understand. How do we cope with them? Maybe they get fed up with them. They burn the bridge. They cut ties. And a lot of people are not ever diagnosed.
Wow. You've just described a bunch of people that we've worked with. I'm just going to say that.
I mean, I feel like this, I mean, not necessarily.
So Kat's asking me if I think it was a good decision to legalize weed and psychedelics in certain states. Personally, I'm more of a libertarian when it comes to drug stuff. I think people should have the freedom to do what they want. And so with weed, I mean, a lot of people seem to be helped by weed. I'm not one of them. I don't like it. But for people that it helps, I'm all for it being there for them. Psychedelics, I've heard people have good experiences, me included, with psychedelics, and some people can really turn their life around. But anytime, like a psychedelic's not going to be magic. If you don't follow through and make changes, that psychedelic experience can be pretty siloed. And I've also seen plenty of narcissistic people, by the way, that do all sorts of psychedelics and never seem to have any kinds of spiritual awakenings, and they don't really improve. Their grandiose self just gets bigger. They're good at image management. They become the spiritual shaman. But real change, not so much with them. But long story short, I'm all for that being legal.
Schizoaffective disorder, but I
Right.
feel like there's tons of undiagnosed mental illnesses everywhere.
Yes.
That if diagnosed correctly and treated effectively, people could be a hell of a lot happier and could be in a much better place in life. But we don't do that, or we're not equipped to do that. We're not capable of doing that as a society, at least not yet. Let me ask you this about Nick Reiner. If this was always something that's been there, it was looked over. Obviously, money was not an issue. He went to pretty much every of the best rehabs that have been out there, and all of that. This took till 2020 to be diagnosed. Today, if there was 14-year-old Nick Reiner today, and this started, and his journey through all this was just beginning, are we any better today than we were 17 years ago, or say 30 years ago, at identifying these sort of things and treating them earlier in children or young adults than we were back then?
I think we're better at it. And again, I always say I don't have data to show how much better are we.
I think we're probably better just based on the fact that there's so much more awareness because of social media and online. So we know a lot more about family systems. We know, and the layperson knows more too. And there's a plethora of knowledge on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, podcasts, where people can learn all about this. And people can learn about the root causes of why they do what they do. Oh, maybe it's CPTSD. Maybe it's trauma. Maybe it's narcissistic parents. Whatever it is, though, I think online makes it easier for people to figure it out. As far as the treatment goes, that depends. That not all treatment centers are created equally.
But it all depends on the quality of care, and can you get access to a good psychiatrist, psychologist. They should have in-depth psychological testing. And, we're doing a lot of slapping easy diagnoses on now with everybody's got ADHD, everybody's on the autistic spectrum. I mean, I think
everyone's a narcissist.
Everybody's a narcissist. 9 out of 10 people I know believe they have ADD and autism now, And so I think we get on these bandwagons sometimes where maybe it's a pediatrician, they do a checklist, they go, okay, ADHD, let's give ADHD meds. So it really depends on the quality of the evaluation. And I'm a big believer in a child psychologist who specializes in testing. And don't go with an easy diagnosis without the testing. And so I think it probably varies from community to community, what the resources are. But like you say, the Reiners had resources. But we also know that they put him in a wilderness program when he was 15. Totally inappropriate for somebody who's got budding psychosis, because those programs will make it worse. They're incredibly stressful. A lot of people feel like they're borderline abusive. Kids have died out in the wilderness in these brutal conditions. So I can say that.
And we talked about this before in another stream. Some of those can be pretty bad places. But again, we also, unrelated to the wilderness programs, is it an accurate diagnosis for Nick? That's also something I'd be curious about.
It was bad judgment. And did somebody advise them to try this for him? Did they get sold a marketing package that this is going to fix your kid? I don't know. So I would love to have the ability to go through all his medical and treatment records, because I think it would fill in the blanks on a lot of this stuff.
The wilderness treatment screams of desperation to me. Like they've tried everything else. We're just going to throw them to the wolves, almost literally.
Yeah.
Well, that'd be great. Well, we have live wolves that your children will be living around.
Yeah.
And see if they survive. If they come back.
On one hand, though, like I think it was their attempt to do tough love. Now, those wilderness programs have fallen out of favor as being bad. But I would also say if what they were doing wasn't working, I don't blame them for trying something different. But knowing what we know now, definitely not good.
They're healed, you know?
Yeah.
I'm curious about some of these programs. And we don't know the specific ones that he was in, other than yes, there has been allegations that he was in a wilderness program and God knows what else. And on the surface, I'm sure you can find, an introduction YouTube video or a website for most of these places. And I'm sure it looks soft and cuddly and warm and lovely and healing and refreshing and rejuvenating and whatever other, keywords you want to throw in there that make it think, oh, finally, we found a solution. And if you're the parents of Nick Reiner or anybody that's struggling with a child that is either suffering from mental illness or addiction or both, hearing those words is going to be a breath of fresh air, especially if you're like new to the cycle of this and you're not 17 in. If it's new, you're like, wow, maybe this will work because nothing else that we've tried so far hasn't. How much vetting do these sort of programs actually do for the people that they admit? And it probably, I'm sure, varies from organization to organization, but I'm wondering how many of these are just kind of out there on their own. There's not a lot of supervision. There's not a lot of checks and balances on the system. If you got a license and you're not killing people, we'll pretty much let anybody in as long as your check clears. Is that kind of how a lot of these work? Or do they take a look at the individuals that go into these and go, yeah, this would be applicable for this person because of this, and this, or no, this would not be applicable because their symptoms are this, and this is not going to be for them? Or is it more that rubber stamp type thing, like, thanks for the check, here's your sleeping bag?
Yeah, let me reflect on that. I think most do a good job of assessment and diagnosis. I mean, they have to be assessed before they're accepted into the program. I think usually they've got good clinicians. They try to do an accurate assessment. But is there a profit motive in America for everything about healthcare? Undoubtedly, there's a bias that keep the beds full, because when the beds are full, we're making profit. And obviously a lot of these,
and that's the issue with anything. There's going to be anything where there's a profit motive that can always distort it a little bit. It opens things up to more corruption, more exploitation, always. Anything where there's money, that can be the case though too. So even if something is not even for profit, just government funded, there's different kinds of corruption in things like that. So, because even the government programs, a lot of times they need to charge, they make money, so they need to pay salaries. I mean, it becomes difficult.
Really expensive places that offer yoga and massage and, vegan food if you want it, and all these things. They cater to celebrities and people with a lot of money. And it would not be unusual to find that perhaps they're admitting people that, is not the best fit for them. It's really hard to say. I do know Sierra Tucson I can recommend in Tucson, which is, I think I've had a client there. I actually went and visited, an impeccable program. They do psych testing. They do in-depth psychiatric care. They treat dual disorders. They treat eating disorders, substance abuse, and they're stellar. But there are a lot of places in California that are really expensive and fancy and cater to celebrities. And I think some are probably very good, but I can't speak for all of them.
Yeah.
What sort of checks and balances exist into any of this stuff to determine, how effective they are, how ethical they are, how safe they are? I mean, is there anything? Is there anybody going in and monitoring this sort of stuff to make sure that some of these aren't just a cash grab and basically predatory behavior?
So, a question for the chat, because I don't know that much about these wilderness programs. Are they still in existence, for one? And if so, are they all still awful, or are there more checks and balances, or does it really depend on the one you go to? I don't know the answer to this, so let me know, chat.
On the rich that can afford these sort of things, that are looking for help and have the means to go, yeah, whatever it is, here's more money. Let's try and fix this problem.
I think there are checks and balances. These hospitals have to be accredited by the state as far as their practices, to make sure that they're not just warehousing people, doing no treatment and collecting the money. And so I think they have to be accredited. And I'm not sure how often auditors come around, but auditors do go around and look at records, look at the treatment program, look at what's offered. Do they keep, I don't know that they all keep outcome studies. They should be keeping outcome studies. I think they do on, how effective is what they do. But obviously with cases like Nick Reiner that are incredibly difficult and complicated, there's probably not a program in the world that could have really made a dent in what was going on with him.
Yeah.
Are there areas of this, and I'm not speaking specifically to Nick Reiner, but to our audience that's listening to this that may be in similar situations, because we have so many people who have been finding this very valuable and very interesting, watching this play out, who have been in similar situations. I'm thinking back to like Ruby, Frankie, Jody, Hildebrandt, where they're not therapists.
Right.
Jody was for a while, lost her licensing, and then became a life coach.
Yeah.
And look, I'm sure there's lovely, decent life coaches out there that are effective, that it just is what it is. And I'm sure there's predatory ones too. And there's probably ones that don't even know they're predatory. They're just psychotic, but think that they're, they have a God complex going on about them, kind of Jody Hildebrandt-ish. Does that exist in this sort of area as well for rehabilitation, where there's the official, there's the therapeutic, there's the, yes, we are accredited and we are governed this way. And then there's one over here that looks almost identical, but their disclaimer says it all, of this is not this, it's a life coaching type of situation.
Yeah, I'm sure there are those things. And life coaches, there are a lot of programs that are residential in nature, which you could call like a halfway house or something like that. They don't have professional staff. Some of them are based on an AA model, which can be very helpful. But they would certainly miss psychosis if somebody was in a situation like that, because they don't have mental health people on staff. So there's a lot of that, particularly around substance abuse rehab. If it's a non-accredited, non-hospital kind of based program, or an official hospital sponsored, sometimes they have outpatient programs where people go to groups every day and get daily support, but you have real therapists running them and real psychiatrists involved.
What's your take on the reasoning?
And the thing about the real psychiatrists and therapists is some of them, they're not as good as the people that have experience with the issue. There's a lot of people who have struggled with addiction. They'd rather go to somebody that knows what they've gone through. But that depends on the person too. So just because there's professionals doesn't always mean they're going to be great professionals, right? There are different qualities of professionals, as anyone who's gone to a therapist because they've been experiencing narcissistic abuse will tell you. Not all therapists are created equally. There are some narcissistic therapists. There are narcissistic people in any given profession, period. And there's some therapists that invalidate victims of abuse, tell them they need to empathize with the abuser, put yourself in their shoes, or they'll say other unhelpful things, and they really invalidate the client. So it all depends. It all depends.
for the medication change. Sources are saying that Nick was stable on his medication until about a month before the actual murders. Great. But doctors changed it after he complained about weight gain, which is a common reason people change medications.
Yes, it is.
This is not a unusual thing to Nick Reiner. Is it vanity related? Yeah, but it can also be health related too, if somebody doesn't want to put on weight. What does a transition like this typically look like for someone with schizoaffective disorder? Is it a safe proposition to be like, okay, yeah, we can change that? And you're just going to be in the care of your 78-year-old father and your 70-year-old mother in the guest house. Does that typically work out okay? I mean, normally it's going to be somebody in their bedroom or on the couch of mom and dad. In a lot of situations here, does that normally work out okay? Or is this something where he really should have been in some sort of an inpatient 24/7 monitored facility to go through this experience?
Well, we can look at it with hindsight and say he should have been in the hospital for this.
Right.
But I can tell you, I have never seen a case where a med change was done and they put someone inpatient just for the med change.
Okay.
What's usually done is, you've got your inpatient.
And I think some of this might be a replay, that he's just posting a replay of some of this, because I'm having flashbacks of them talking about some of this. What tricked me is they just posted this today or yesterday, but I'm pretty sure this was also before that too.
Program, which is entirely separate from the doctor that's following him outpatient. And often they're not well coordinated. And so without his medical records, we don't know which doctor and which program did the med change, what was the full rationale for the med change, because my guess there were other things that were possible side effects that he was complaining about. And doctors vary. Some are very cautious about med changes. And I've seen that, particularly if someone is very ill. But also there are doctors that tend to be more humanitarian, we'll say. And if a client is really troubled by side effects, they try to support, okay, let's try something different. But they'd have to document in the records, what was the rationale for changing, one antipsychotic for a different antipsychotic. And it could have been a completely legitimate rationale. So they wouldn't have expected that there was going to be this reaction to it. But
once there's this reaction, this is where you need Nick to be an adult and to be like, okay, I got to do something for myself here. I feel myself going off the rails. But as Stephen King said, you never feel your sanity leaving. You only feel its return. Though sanity in this context isn't the right way to put it, because if he went off to use drugs and things, that's not NGI insanity. That's just an addiction taking over. That's different. That is a different thing. So if he recognizes this in himself, get back on the stable med. If you were stable, get back on the stable med.
It's usually managed outpatient, and what should happen is very close follow-up. Like if we do this med change, I want to see you again in a week. And is it possible that they tried to do that and he didn't show up for the appointment? A
lot can happen in a week too.
A lot can happen. Yeah. And the other thing, if I were involved in this case, I would want a daily phone call from the parents. How's he doing? What are you noticing?
And is he taking his medication?
Is he taking it? And this is incredibly difficult to know. How do they know if he swallows the pill? It's called cheeking the pill, right? People put the pill, even if you're watching them take it. This is notorious in psych hospitals. They'll put the pill in their mouth, pretend to swallow, and the minute, the observer leaves the room, they spit it out and toss it. So that's what we call the anosognosia, the lack of insight that they're sick. They don't get it. And they don't get that if I don't swallow this medication the way I'm supposed to every day, I'm going to lose it. And so, they may think, when we go into the thing about the conspiracy, I mean, it's really common for people who are delusional to start thinking the medication is poisoning them.
Right.
And
There's your conspiracy right there.
There's that out of reality.
And this is something that they'll tell you in like AA or NA too. You got to be really careful what version of yourself you're listening to. They would say your addiction or alcoholism is cunning, baffling, powerful, and it will tell you anything to get you using again, because there's a part of you that just wants you to be dead. And if you use and continue to use and you're an addict, ends in jails, institutions, and death. And yeah, where's Nick Reiner? In jail, at best an institution. So again, if his addiction is telling him, oh yes, your medicines are making you sick, so you need to stop this. And then the part of him that was maybe telling himself that was maybe the meth demon. And the meth demon's like, oh yes, come to me, Nick. Screw those medicines. You don't need that stability. I'll be your friend. I'll be your friend, and I'll be there for you and give you some fun times, Nick. And Nick was like, yes, that sounds great. Where do I sign up?
Reality thinking. Yeah,
and that's exactly how Richard Pryor would talk about his crack and cocaine use in one of his stand-ups. He said his crack pipe would talk to him. He's like, hey, Rich, just forget your responsibilities for the day and come hang out with me. And that's what he would do.
It's a nightmare to manage. And should the parents have been in the position of this, particularly at their age, it's like, oh my God, what a failure.
I've seen I'm sorry, Tony. I've seen a lot of people commenting about, that this is all vanity about him being concerned about weight gain and such. And I want people to step back a little bit. When you're on a medication and you start rapidly gaining weight, your whole life changes. I mean, it's not just I look in the mirror and I see somebody with a puffy face. Your entire life changes. Your clothes aren't fitting. Your body feels different, and it's not good to put on excessive weight. So it is a legitimate concern to say, I am now gaining weight on this medication, and it's concerning to me. So it's, it sounds vanity and that vein that he's like, I'm gaining weight. I want to do something different. But we need to step back and take a look at what that means for health implications as well.
Right, because the cholesterol goes up and there's certain medications.
Diabetic risk.
People will go up to 400, 450 pounds. And it's not uncommon to try, if somebody's gaining a lot of weight rapidly, it's not uncommon for a doctor to say, we've got some alternative choices here.
Right.
Let's give it a try and see if your body responds better. And so, it's definitely not vanity. I don't swallow that one at all. That's pretty negative.
I want to talk about the TMZ doc that came out citing the David Carmichael case as a father who methodically planned his son's killing while he was in a psychotic state, triggered by a medication change of SSRIs. He believed he was saving his son from suffering. He was found not criminally responsible because he didn't understand the nature and quality of his actions. And that's the key part there, nature and quality. From a psychological standpoint, how does someone plan something methodically while genuinely not understanding what they're actually doing?
Very, very common, very common. And, I'm thinking of a case I worked in quite a few years ago, but it was really heartbreaking because it was a very nice young man who had, very kind to people, pro-social. He became psychotic, schizophrenic, hit in his 20s. And he became paranoid, which goes with psychosis. And the angel Gabriel appeared to him and told him that the Mexicans in the Central Valley where he lived were poisoning the California aqueduct.
And this is very similar to my friend previously, who was diagnosed with schizophrenia. Now, he would argue that diagnosis. He also had a thing for stimulants, including meth, but he was clean. But when he went psychotic, or quote unquote psychotic, he would have battles with the devil. And he would tell me people that I knew even were possessed by the devil. They fell under the ice when they were 8 years old. And at that point, they died and they got replaced with a demon. And I knew who he was talking about. And it was very interesting because he said everyone around that person would die. Sometimes they would kill themselves. Other times they would be given a fatal diagnosis. And I was like, huh, that is interesting. So which one is it though? It depends on what you believe.
It happens all the time.
That's very
Happens all the time.
specific.
Yeah,
Who
it was
doesn't have
very
those
it was
visions?
very specific.
Yeah.
He believed it, and he thought it was his job to methodically take a gun and go around and murder these killers because it was justified and he was saving lives. He did it.
That to me is a much different case than I think the Nick Reiner case. That is a fair insanity plea, what she's talking about here, when like the Mexicans and whatever. But I don't think that's what it was with Nick.
Methodically, he bought the gun. He arranged the schedule, and some poor Mexican gardeners were just murdered. He fortunately did go into a mental health forensic facility, which is not a picnic. It's like a prison. It's just got mentally ill people in it. And so they're managed in a different way than the people in prison are managed. But it's not a cushy, program.
That's the reality. I think a lot of people don't quite understand. A lot of people who've been in prison and in mental health facilities like this that are prison based, basically, they say the mental health facility is far worse than actual prison.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
And one of the factors with that, in talking with guys who have been in both, prison was predictable. You knew where the danger was. You knew who to stay away from. You knew, prisons have the gang affiliations in it. You knew who you had to have an ally with. There was a way to stay safe in prison. Mental health facilities, the people are so erratic. Someone may be nice to you one day and then in the cafeteria come up behind you and stab you with a fork because.
I mean, that can happen. But I've known psych nurses. I've known behavioral technicians. I think a lot of them would prefer to work in the mental hospital than a prison. And as far as being a prisoner or a patient of the psych hospital, I tend to think people would rather prefer the psych hospital because if so, I mean, why would anyone even choose to go for not guilty by reason of insanity if it's going to be better in prison? So I don't know about this.
He's hallucinating. So I heard that from a lot of guys that they would rather be in prison than in a mental health facility.
Wow.
TMZ has reported that the Reiner family has grown used to Nick's alarming behavior. At Conan O'Brien's holiday party the night before the murders, guests were reportedly considering calling 911 after Nick's erratic behavior and a loud argument with his father. But the Reiners, they just apologized and left. They've been managing crisis after crisis for 30 years. They paid for 18 plus rehab stays, dual diagnosis facilities, the best treatment that money could buy. And still in this second part here, I want to understand the family psychology, how people who love someone can become trapped in a system that ultimately destroys them. Siobhan Scott, psychotherapist and author, is with us. Grown used to it. That's the phrase that TMZ is reporting that was used. I mean, it's haunting. It's understandable for anybody who's been around someone's erratic behavior for long periods of time and can't really find a way out without extreme measures like just completely separating yourself from the person, whether it be a parent, a family member, a loved one, a spouse. If you don't want to go to that extreme and you're going to try and manage it, you just kind of get used to it. It gets normalized over time. And strangers don't necessarily see it because they're seeing the erraticness. You're not, because you're used to it so much. Let's talk about that. I mean, when you get to that point, some may look at it as enabling, survival, exhaustion, or something else entirely. What's going on? What was going on? Obviously, for the Reiners here, the family, and anyone else who finds themselves in those sort of situations, when they don't realize just how hot the pot has gotten as the water boils and everybody else is like, why are you in there?
Yeah, that's the exact analogy that came to me. It builds over time. They see it every day. It just becomes what they're used to coping with. They do their best and they hold on to hope. And as we've said, the hope can be quite a trap. Look at that image of him. In every image of him I've seen, that is the look of a psychotic person. When they're symptomatic, they get this complete flat expression. They've got a weird look in their eye.
Looks like a very troubled person. Where if you're a parent of small children, you see a man that looks like this, you probably steer him in a different direction. Hey, Johnny, come stick close to me here. You don't want to be too close to this guy.
And my guess is the Reiners, in posing for family pictures with him, they didn't even notice that. Where most of us would go, who's the weird person in this picture?
Yes.
And it stands out as him. And they're all smiling, and some of the pictures with their other kids, everybody looks normal, and you can spot the sick person here. So there's a bit of denial going on. They don't want to lose hope because families cling to that. But it's very hard. And we talked before about, what do you do when you're sensing danger, when they're putting holes in the walls in the house, when they're threatening? It's hard. And of course, the best thing people can do in that situation is call 911 and hope they at least get a 72-hour hold. But how do they protect themselves in a moment? I have another little true story that occurred to me. I haven't shared with you yet. My husband had a good friend. This was my late husband years ago, who was a very nice guy in the community. He ran a lawnmower shop and everybody loved him, the friendly neighborhood guy. And he lived about a mile from us. And it turns out the public did not know he was bipolar and got very psychotic one day, was threatening his wife and his brother in his home. And what did they do? They pushed him out the door and locked him out. Okay. They were trying to stay safe. There's a boundary, right? We want people to set boundaries. What did he do? He ran to our house. I happened to be sitting naked in the bathtub at the time. It was early on a Sunday morning. My husband was in the other room watching football or something in the bedroom. I hear someone burst open in our front door because my husband had let the dogs out and he hadn't locked the door again. Bad thing, keep your door locked. And this guy burst in. I heard screaming and ranting in the living room, which was right around the corner from me sitting naked in the bathtub. Talk about scared to death.
Yeah.
And so I ran out. My husband tried to restrain him, push him out the front door. And I was on the phone with 911. I didn't recognize who he was because he was so out of control. But
you knew this man.
I knew him, but I didn't recognize him. I thought he was a stranger because he was so disheveled and so bizarre. And why did he come to our house? I guess he just knew where we lived and figured, hey, I can't get in my house. I'll just go over there. But the cops came immediately, picked him up, took him in for a hold. And I was so upset. I said, I don't ever want contact with that family again. And I was angry at the family for handling it that way. Why didn't they call 911? It's like you don't just push them out the door and let him go wreak havoc in the neighborhood. So it's really hard for families to know what to do. And Stacey, as you've mentioned, sometimes there have been shootings. 50% of the police shootings are in these situations when the person is told to comply or get down on the ground or drop the knife. They're psychotic. They don't comply, and then they end up dead. So it's really, families are in a bind. And yes, they love this kid.
That's why the committed against their will thing could be so important, because that happens. And there's been debates, should they send social workers out with police? To me, that would need to almost be a different position entirely, because that person would probably also need to be trained with some firearms as well, depending on the situation. So it's just complicated. But I know many police officers, they're not really trained to deal with mental health. They're in over their head. So that's why they thought, we should bring social workers out there. So what you would need is a social worker cop mix. Something to think about.
But as we've said, with the $10,000 a month allowance, that's enabling. That's not helping. And we really need a system that functions where families are not put in this position of having to manage a mentally ill person.
Families aren't prepared or equipped to handle a mentally ill person. I mean, even someone with training, and experience like yourself. I mean, nobody is equipped to do this in their own home ever, period. It's just no one should be doing that. There are places when someone is in that sort of state. And you're exactly right. The biggest thing is families hold on to hope. They hold on to that hope that something's going to change. They're going to get better. They remember a time. And it's horrible sometimes, especially when people like this go up and down and up and down. And you got a couple good months here and see, look.
I mean, and that's a good point, George. Nick did need support. They were trying to give it to him. But I also think Nick needed friends. I think Nick needed male friends that had his best interest in mind. And sometimes a woman can serve that function too. But I think if you're so far gone, not many women are going to want to serve that function. But a male friend to say, hey, dude, what the hell are you doing? Someone just to be there as a little bit of a guideline, as a guardrail, I should say. And that would have been the benefit of going to a 12-step program or smart recovery. But his ego couldn't handle either one. So he never did. But that's where you find people that can be your guardrail to try to keep you in line. But it seems like Nick was doing this whole thing on his own, besides his parents. And clearly, he was very bitter and resentful towards his parents. So he didn't have that connection. That's where the program, smart recovery, some kind of community and friends would have really helped him.
Look, they're demonstrating everything can be fine and dandy and it's wonderful. And then all of a sudden, shit can just go sideways very, very fast. And I mean, correct me if I'm wrong here, but when you try to analyze, well, why didn't the family call 911 in this situation? Why hadn't some sort of intervention outside of the family taken place beforehand in various situations? And I'm talking beyond Nick Reiner here. It's because it makes it real. Because it makes it real beyond the confines of that home. When other people get involved and other people are aware of this, then it's real. Then it's a real problem. Then it's something that has to be dealt with beyond just our hopes and wishes and dreams and whatever other bullshit we like to tell ourselves that things are just going to get better. And the person who is perpetrating a lot of these issues, that's the kryptonite. They also know. They don't want to be called out or called on or have somebody outside come in and make it real. And holding on to hope for a lot of people, that becomes something they do for many, 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 many years rather than simply accept reality. And it's not easy to accept reality when it comes to something like this. I remember an example of that in my own world, in my own life. I was with someone for a very long time, and they had basically a psychotic break going on, but there was years of patterns of behavior that led up to this. And when I finally had to call 911, the first thing that was said was no, because then they're going to take me away. Then they're going to see what I am, of what, and my reaction was, you're damn right they are, because I can't do this anymore by myself. And then reality hits you hard. And then those ideas, those years of, well, this was good for this time and that time, it all goes out the window, and you're suddenly in a very new reality. And if you're chugging along okay, blowing up the world isn't exactly something that's on everybody's to-do list at that moment in time. Maybe it will get better. Maybe it will temporarily. Maybe. But it always is going to go back to something horrible. Is that why you think a lot of times these sort of things fester for as long as they do? Not only in the part of the person who's ill, that is victimizing others, but also on the part of the people who are healthy, who also, are dealing with their own stuff and trying to keep a semblance of normalcy in their lives without dropping a bomb on an already explosive situation.
Yeah, it's the work in therapy, I think, for families. And as we've said, I always encourage families to go to therapy to get support. Doesn't mean that they're mentally ill, but it's support for how do I cope with my mentally ill relative here.
And that's what Al-Anon would be for. But there's other versions of that too. Getting your own therapy, getting your own counseling. Because what they'll tell you is you can't fix the addict or the person with a mental illness. You can only work on your side of the street. And they're 100% correct.
Because they need some outside objectivity to deal with that hope and that unrealistic expectation that things can improve. And I think that's where a good therapist who's experienced with psychosis, not all are, but to give them a gentle nudge toward reality that your hope is unrealistic here. I see people clinging to that, and it cycles. Their loved one, usually their adult child, is incarcerated, goes into a mental facility, gets out, and they take them back into their home again. And then they'll say, oh, but he's applying for jobs now. And I can look at this and say, this has been going on for 20 years. He's not going to be employed. So he's on his medications now. He has a history of going off them, and then he gets dangerous, and then the cycle starts over again. But it's very hard for parents to hear that.
Well, and they're wrapped up in the cycle too. They're part of the cycle as well. So it's just this repetitive nature of, oh, he got better, here we go again.
Yeah.
And again, it's something I see in our chat section. A lot of people are wondering why the parents just kept putting up with it, and they should have thrown him away and thrown the key away as well. The love of a child is such that they just hold on to that hope, and it's the hope that kills you.
Yeah.
And in this case, it actually did.
Yeah, it
It's
did.
bad.
And there are parents who throw them out, who break the bonds. But as you've also said, Stacy, then that puts the dangerous person out into the homeless population on the street. And we know how much violence goes on in those communities. And, there are terrible cases of people walking.
And these are some of the most difficult situations because there's so many variables: the addiction, the mental health, are they willing? So at worst, you need to protect society from people that are mentally ill and addicted, but aren't willing to help themselves. So you have to protect society at a point. That's where the committing them against their will comes in. But then on other sides, you got to get them to try to want to do what is best for them. There's a fair amount of homeless people that do have a place to stay. They just don't want to. They'd rather be on the street. So what do you do with them? Are they the people that you commit involuntarily? Perhaps. So there's just a lot of different variables and factors in this stuff, and there is no perfect solution. There's a lot of disagreements about a lot of this stuff too. There's a lot of debates in the addiction community, the mental health community, etc.
Down the street, it's happened in my city, and a psychotic person just comes up and stabs them to death. I mean, there was one recently like that. And so I think there's also an element of, well, we don't want to put this person out because they're going to deteriorate even more and become more dangerous. So parents are really between a rock and a hard place on how the hell do you work with this.
I think you got that with parents, you have that with spouses, you have that with anybody that's caring for someone like this. And that's the harsh reality of it is, if you are the healthy one in the relationship, you oftentimes view yourself as, I'm the only person like keeping this all together. And it's not even always the fear that something's going to happen to them by someone else. It's what are they going to do?
What are they going to do?
They capable of doing? And what could possibly happen in those sort of scenarios, and what are they capable of doing, if my influence is gone? If I said, screw this, you're on your own, they still have autonomy because there's not a way to just go, they're crazy, lock them up forever. That's not how this works. They're going to be out there. They're going to do their crazy stuff, and they're going to act out in the ways that they do. And if you just decide to cut that leash, you have no idea when that rabid animal is going to come flying back through your window one night at 3 a.m. because of whatever the hell delusion is going on in their mind. And so I think a lot of times, if you're the parent, if you're the spouse, if you're the whatever, you're constantly thinking, well, it's bad, but it ain't that bad.
Not yet.
And not yet. But it's a lose-lose proposition for somebody in that caregiver type situation. But you do wonder about that. And I think that's what also keeps people close. I think I see this too a lot, not just in like the parent-child or parent-adult child, but in the spouse type situation, where I would guess, and I think this is very underreported and underestimated because it's hard to quantify it, because there's not just like stats out there on this, where you have one parent staying with the other parent because they don't trust the other parent with the well-being of the child on their own. And if you're there, if you're able to sit there and kind of be the check to make sure that nothing crazy happens here, okay, then their interactions are fine. But the idea of this person that you know that is not mentally stable taking care of this child on their own who doesn't have very much autonomy, that's far scarier than going, I'll eat pigeon here for a little while and just deal with this because I'm going to keep my kids safe versus that. I think that's a very real reality. That's something I dealt with. That's how I felt for a very long time. And that's part of the reasons I kept and stayed in a very toxic relationship for a while, because you're thinking about all the possibilities down the road, the cause and effect. Not everyone does that, but I think that's a reason a lot of people stay in those sort of relationships.
Yeah, and the other component of this that has struck me is at 78 years old, my gosh, what were the plans for him after they're gone? You know, what was going to happen?
Well, and what would have happened when they start their decline? They probably were on their decline. I mean, I heard a lot of interviews with Rob Reiner in recent years, and he seemed very on top of things. But within a matter of years, his mental capacity could have started to decline. So now you've got, let's just say, and I don't know this, but I'm just speculating, you know, maybe he's 83, 84 years old and starting to develop dementia.
Exactly.
And now his wife, who's younger, is caring for him and this other child. Now you've just got this tornado of what the F? I can't imagine.
And I think you have in the Reiner situation, and I'm just speaking from observation. I'm going to guess. I mean, they were a fairly tight-knit family. Rob and Michelle probably had it in their mind that, well, once we pass on, they got Nick or they got Romy, and they got the other kid there that will.
I mean, you'd be surprised how little people think things through sometimes, especially families that are a little more conflict avoidant. A lot of them will sweep things under the rug for a long time. And maybe Rob and his wife are thinking, and I guess Rob's wife is younger, right? Was she 60s or early 70s? But they probably didn't have that much of a plan. They probably just had like, okay, the siblings will figure it out maybe. I don't know. I don't know what their plan was, but you would be surprised. It's not as well thought out as a lot of people would think.
Take care, that they'll take care of their loved one because they're family, and that's what families do. I think we see the reality of that today, where a bond between a mother or a father and a child is very different than that necessarily of a sibling relationship. And the mother-father bond tends to have a lot more grace, if you will. These other folks, they have their own lives to live. They're not there to be the caregiver of the sibling that can't get their shit together for whatever reason it may be. And I think that's also where we see the reaction. And again, we don't know exactly what happened, why Alan Jackson left this case, as to why Nick now has a public defender, because I think they said very quickly, no. I mean, mom and dad played that role, all that, and we maybe didn't necessarily agree with it, but we're not saying it out loud. We are not mom and dad.
Mhm.
And good effing luck.
And that's a healthy response. I
yes,
would
it is.
always encourage siblings to not take on that role. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not theirs to play.
Yeah.
It's not, no matter what anybody tries to tell you or guilt you or your mind guilting yourself, it's not your role.
Yeah.
And I think accepting that it's a hard pill to swallow for some. The Reiners reportedly spent a fortune on dual diagnosis treatment facilities designed to address both addiction and mental illness. Nick went into 18 plus of them, and yet sources say he'd stay only about 30 days, long enough to detox, and then before any real psychiatric treatment could take hold. Siobhan Scott is with us as we break down all of this psychotherapist.
So Michelle Reiner was 70 years old. I mean, she could have had another 20 to 25 years left. I have a grandmother who's 96, about to be 97. So her life got cut short by a couple decades, maybe. And she would have been there till what? If she lives till at least 90, Nick is 52 at that point.
And author. Let's talk about that a little bit. 30 days for detox. Okay. But actually treating mental illness in any sort of meaningful way, especially something as complex as schizoaffective disorder, that's not reality. But that's how the system kind of worked. It got in there for 30 days. You want to keep going, Nick? That's up to you. And Nick's the one who kept saying, I'm good. I'm out.
Yeah.
18 rehabs. Is this something where we look at these rehab facilities and say, you failed him, or did Nick fail by not committing to treatment?
I have never heard of an inpatient treatment program that keeps people for longer than 30 days. It just is the standard protocol, 30 days. Yes, there's detox, but they're getting daily therapy too. And most of them have dual disorder programs. So they're getting psych meds. They're getting evaluated. I mean, they're not getting psych meds if they don't diagnose a psychiatric problem, if it's primarily substance abuse. But most treat both disorders. And then there's a discharge plan for continued treatment in the community. And often, in fact, I would say most of the time now, you move from inpatient to a residential treatment program, which continues to deal with the treatment, or you move to what's called an intensive outpatient treatment program, where you're not spending the night there, but you are attending, let's say, 4 or 5 hours a day of group and individual and therapy support. And that's kind of the norm, how it's done. Now, did he do his 30 days and then follow up with the recommended treatments? We don't know that without his records. But yeah, for someone like this, with this degree of substance abuse, I would say releasing back to home was not going to be adequate. So he needed some kind of ongoing care past the 30 days.
And Siobhan, that's how the system works. That's the norm. Is that how it should be, though? I mean, is the system broken by design right now, where it's not effectively doing any of these sort of things? I mean, if you're going in for addiction therapy and you have a mental health illness, it's not going to be super effective dealing with any of that, the mental illness area, when you're dealing with the addiction right off the bat. I mean, a lot of addicts are going to tell you they never remember the first 30 days, the first 2 months, 3-4 months of that, because they're getting clean at that moment in time. Is this really just a system that, okay, yeah, it's how it's functioned. Everyone else seems to be going through this too, but should it be functioning this way? Is there room for improvement here?
I think there's always room for improvement. And could we see more flexibility for some of these really severe diagnoses, that they get a longer stay inpatient? But the other thing that we need much more of is called assistant outpatient treatment, and have it mandatory, so that when a person like Nick,
I think at the bare minimum, you need mandatory outpatient, preferably though mandatory inpatient, to keep society safe. That's what I would say.
Nick has done his 30 days. He does not go back to mom and dad. He does not go back to the streets. He does not go back home to his wife, who doesn't have the capacity to deal with it. He goes into a residential program where there are clinicians there daily who monitor him, who monitor the taking of the meds, drug testing to make sure the person is not using. And so it's a shift from an inpatient program, which those programs are incredibly expensive. And is it necessary? I think shifting to mandatory assisted outpatient treatment would be a really, really good thing. And a lot of people are lobbying. There was lobbying in one of the states' senates in the East Coast. I know somebody who went in and spoke about the need for that. But again, that takes a major change in the system. We have to create laws, state to state, that mandate assisted outpatient treatment program for people who.
So Kat's asking how much Rob and Michelle were around during Nick's childhood. If I had to guess, Rob was around less. I don't know how much his wife was around, though. That is a good question. But what I would think is Rob was sporadically there, and then for periods of time not there. That's what I would guess.
Who have these chronic, severe problems.
Patient autonomy is a core principle in mental health treatments. Adults have the right to refuse care, but when someone in a psychotic state or with a psychotic disorder like Nick Reiner is making the decisions that endanger themselves and others, is that really autonomy, or is that illness that's making the decisions and all of us looking the other way going, oh yeah, they have rights. They have rights, as the illness calls the shots.
Yeah, that's one of the things that makes me most crazy about all of this, is this idea that because we're in America and everybody's got freedom to choose, which is kind of a joke because our freedoms are being limited all the time, but people have freedom here. And if they choose to be crazy on the street, that's their human right to be crazy on the street. If I'm ever crazy on the street, come get me, give me a big shot of Thorazine. Right?
It's your right, though. It's your right to do that. You have every right to live under a bridge and shoot up meth and drink from the porta potty.
It's cruel.
So back in the day at the mental hospitals, they would call it the Thorazine shuffle. So they would give it to people that are kind of like off the wall, injections of Thorazine, and they'd be shuffling. They'd call it the Thorazine shuffle. Look it up.
It is cruel.
It is.
Yeah. And I think people who maintain this, this rights position, they do not understand the magnitude of the problem. Clearly, they don't have people in their family who are dealing with this. And this is something I write about all the time, is that we need to understand this better. We need to have compassion, and compassion for this kind of situation is mandatory treatment and containment for them.
Have you ever talked to anyone who stands up for things like this that has any sort of experience firsthand, or is it always just repeating talking points or some bullshit they read somewhere that makes them feel like they're virtue signaling how much they're standing up for the rights of the mentally ill, while actually having no real world experience with the mentally ill?
Yes, very much so. And also, it's this anti-psychiatry movement that you see in Scientology, that all the psychiatric meds are toxic and they're killing people. And so, people have the right to not take that. And in truth, they're saving lives. Are there side effects with some? But we get newer medications all the time with fewer side effects. And that may be why they tried to do a med switch about the weight gain with him, is that, okay, we have a newer one here where you don't have weight gain on it. Let's give that a try and see how you do. The problem is they didn't follow up closely enough to see what he was doing.
Is it possible that he wasn't doing anything erratic until maybe the day of the party?
It's possible. Yeah, it's possible. It can come off.
Here's the other thing, George. Was Nick close to his siblings? It's one thing to not have a great connection with your parents. A lot of people don't have a great connection with your parents, but it's more likely to have a connection with your siblings. You're closer in age, experiencing things on a similar timeline. That would be curious. I didn't hear much about Nick having a relationship with his older brother. It seems like they were very different people. It almost seems like he was trying to be closer to Romy, but Romy wasn't really feeling it. She didn't really feel safe with him, which means to me, doesn't sound like he was close to either of them.
Come on really quickly. Yeah. I've seen that one person normal one day and the next day raging and trying to run people over with his car. And it can happen fast.
In the way that our society currently functions, I mean, the Reiners did everything families are told to do. They got him treatment. They didn't ignore the problem. They supported him. They supported him financially. They kept him close so they can monitor him, and it ended with their deaths. What is the lesson here for other families dealing with severely mentally ill loved ones? And is the system even capable of preventing outcomes like this?
Message to families is get support for yourself. Call NAMI, National Alliance for the Mentally Ill. Get in some of their groups. They do wonderful work. They offer support and can refer to local resources. Find a clinician who has experience with this stuff. There may be local support groups in your community, but families need support and guidance and help knowing how to set boundaries and how to stay safe. And for those of us who have the time and energy to lobby at the state level, we need to do better on this issue. And that has to be done at a state-by-state basis. And I think some states are doing better than others with understanding this. I understand there are a handful of states that have good assisted outpatient treatment programs now, but it's voluntary. And so we need the law to say, look, there's a certain category of people that are potentially dangerous, that are not going to do treatment voluntarily. They need to be mandated, and it's that or jail, So we need to lower the bar for when somebody can be hospitalized. It shouldn't just be imminent danger, It needs to be when there's a pattern, a progressive pattern of deterioration, of threatening behavior. That needs to be the bar, not just, when the threat is imminent. I've been putting a 5-part series on Substack this week. I'm about halfway through it. It's called Before the Violence. And this is the kind of thing I'm delving into, how to recognize what's going on.
This is a very important thing that she's doing there on Substack. Before the violence. What does this speak to? The need for prevention. Because ultimately, that's the most important thing about talking about these things. It's not just about the gossip and drama. It's about what can we do moving forward. And that's what her program is on Substack. So when I have her on the show, if she agrees, we can go over some of that.
What families can do, and then the final segment will be on what we need to do as a society. So,
and stop being so reactionary. How about if once you start to see these issues, let's get people the help that they need to manage them instead of, holy crap, they are trying to run me over with their car.
Yeah.
Let's do something before that point.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Your Substack is linked from our Substack if you want to check it. What is your Substack address? Just to put it out there.
Psychology, Spotlight on Psychology is
.substack.com.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Check that out. And her link is also, you're the only one I have a recommendation for on our current Substack.
We work in sync. We work in sync.
So do check out her writings. They're very, very compelling. And the link is there. Ours is hiddenkillers.substack.com. You can join in our conversation there as well as on YouTube. Siobhan's latest book, Nightbird. It's her memoir. Highly suggest checking this out. Available wherever books are.
Hear that, chat? Nightbird. It's her memoir. Interesting.
Sold. Again, leave us your thoughts in the comments on YouTube and on our Substack. The link is in the description. And please leave us a review there on Apple Podcasts. If you're finding our conversations and our reporting valuable, some kind words there is all.
Back in my day at WVU, time travel back to 2003, 2004, when roses would come on the dance floor, because West Virginia was a weird place. They had all these underage bars where they were known for the freshmen and sophomores to go, which is, most places don't have that, but West Virginia did. But whenever Roses played, all the women would scream and then dart to the dance floor. You don't see much of that anymore, honestly. Maybe it's just the fact I'm not going, but I feel like people don't do that as much. People weren't in their phones back then, so they were bumping, grinding, all sorts of wild stuff, going from the windows to the wall.
Always very much appreciated. All right. We'll continue our conversation in the comment sections on YouTube and Substack. Until next time, for Siobhan, Stacy, and Todd.
All right. Well, I guess that's the end of that there. Had a good few hours and 3 hours and 15 minutes. Yes, Sam, we're here to help if you need us, if you want any feedback about anything. You're very welcome, Ellie. We went over a lot of good stuff today. Nick Reiner topic is a good topic because it goes over many other things too. It overlaps with narcissism, addiction, mental health, laws, all sorts of things. Exactly right, Captain. She's not alone. And depending on the situation, right? You'll say this too shall pass, or sometimes that's not appropriate, but you never know. You don't know until you know the situation. But as long as she knows that people are here, that's important to know. But especially with kids, right? When people have issues with their kids, that really hits home. Yeah, it could take 4 to 6 weeks to adjust for sure, Maureen. And I don't know, again, if the weight gain was just his excuse to get off the meds, or was it his addiction speaking? Oh, you need to do this because you need meth, right? And it'll help you lose weight too, by the way. But the antipsychotics will blunt your high, so you don't want that. So you need to get off the meds, and meth will help you lose weight, Nick. That might be. So this is what I'm going to put, the shepherd of black sheep. When you see me put wizard emoji, black heart emoji, white sheep emoji, shepherd of black sheep. Eva actually gave me the idea for that. She didn't know it, but she did. I would agree with that, Kat, and he should have at least been able to go back on them. Absolutely, Ann. Money and funding is always a thing. Very understandable, Heather. And I understand that I'd put my parents through a lot. They put me through a lot as well, but it's never what you want to see, right? As a parent, that your kid to be struggling. Holy mackerel. I do full-heartedly agree with that, George. When the student is ready, the teacher will arrive. And I think that's how it's been for me on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. That's how it is. People find me or others like me when they're supposed to. It's the same thing I tell people, you learn about narcissism when you're supposed to. Everyone always wishes they learned about it sooner, but that's not everyone's journey. Like I learned about it in my late 20s. No, maybe not. Early 30s, maybe even. And that was a sixth sense moment for me where everything began to click and make sense, along with the other things. I've had a lot of pieces of the puzzle I've had to put together. I was Humpty Dumpty, baby, let me tell you. So between undiagnosed autism, anxiety, addiction, CPTSD, narcissistic relationships, and family, my Lord, that's the one, Eva. That gave me the idea. Yeah, that was a good part of it, Maureen. I think you'll like that part. That was good. He called him an entitled monster, which also leads me to believe, yeah, he could be schizoaffective, but I think he was comorbid with a cluster B disorder as well. That's not a diagnosis, but it seems that way. Thank you, George. It's always a pleasure to have George OG in the chat. Well, you're amongst friends now, Heather. A nice flock of black sheep here. But all right, everybody. Him? Who's him, Sunshine? But it's about time to pack it up here. I'm getting tired. My social batteries depleted. You got it, Heather. But Caroline, Heather, Kat, George, Sunshine, Eva, Kat, Maureen, Anne, Tigress. Hannah's in there. And everyone else. Till next time, I'll be back again tomorrow night with something. I don't know what I'll be back with, but I'll be back with something. Of course, Kat, I'm happy to provide the space. And Sam, you're amongst friends here as well. If you ever need to talk about something, if you need a group of 961 ears, which would be 1,922 ears, 961 pairs of ears, we are here. And Ellie, can't forget Ellie either. All right, everybody, I'm signing off. Good night, everyone. I'm glad there's so many people in the chat today, especially 3 hours and 25 minutes in. It's pretty awesome. Thanks for modding Songbits. I'm going to try to add Livin as a moderator as well. So everyone thanks Songbits Laura as well. All right. But again, like the video if you didn't, subscribe to the channel if you're not, and I'll see you tomorrow night.